It all starts in front of a high-voltage box with a danger and electric shock warning. The young man holds several wires, thinking that if he gets caught now, it'll be the end of the line. Just then, two guys grab the young man as he tries to resist being taken back. In that moment, he realizes that being captured there would mean it's all over for him. So, the protagonist decides to touch the cables together and create a very strong short circuit. But he'd rather make a sacrifice than be captured again, and just like that, a burst of energy happens. With that, all three are hit by the charge, and the boy states that he prefers this outcome. But none of that matters because there is a heart of resurrection beating inside his chest. Even with his body badly hurt, the young man gets up and declares that he will never truly be gone. This is the beginning of the story of Resurrection Boy, and the secret about this special organ. In this world, there are many different hearts, and each one has a unique characteristic. This bizarre mutation affects only a minority of people and brings with it strange abilities. Depending on the type of organ, the user can manifest powers that surpass those of humans. Because of this, these individuals became known to everyone as heart mutants. Many envy this gift and say it's a divine blessing, but the reality is quite different. The protagonist hears this and feels like laughing as he rummages through a trash can. He looks at his own miserable state and blames that power for his life being so difficult. But right now, the priority is to find something to eat, because hunger is driving the young man crazy. Then, the boy finds a piece of bread thrown away and is overjoyed with his luck. Even though it's in the middle of the filth, the survivor starts eating desperately, saying the food doesn't even smell bad. While he's eating, a dog approaches the young man who is squatting near the trash. He notices the animal's presence and asks if the little dog is hungry too, offering a piece. The dog then accepts the food and begins to lick the young man's skeletal hand. But suddenly, several other dogs appear and surround the boy, who hears a strange noise. Scared, he hides behind a wall and peeks out, wondering if it's the guys from the lab. However, he only sees 3 street bullies who are cornering a defenseless student. Realizing the situation, the protagonist is relieved and understands they are just local delinquents. The guys continue to bother the girl, telling her she already knows how the world works. At that moment, the skeleton notices the girl is holding a bag of pet food and understands why she's there. Seeing that injustice, the young man decides to interfere and starts walking toward the group. He tells the aggressors to stop, and they turn around, confused, asking who this homeless person is. Then, the protagonist gets close to one of the guys and states that he is not some homeless person. The bully is terrified upon seeing the skeleton's face up close and starts to scream in fear. At that moment, our hero's arm transforms into a very sharp bone blade. With the weapon in hand, he tells the delinquent to be quiet and get out of there as fast as possible. With that, the bullies run away terrified, shouting that they saw a ghost while the girl watches. The student, still on the ground, tries to stutter out a thank you for the unexpected help, but the skeleton turns to her and points his finger in a very scary way. The girl panics and yells for the creature not to come closer, asking it to stay far away, but he just ignores her distress and picks up the bag of pet food that fell on the ground during the commotion. The student is completely confused by the strange creature's actions. Then, she tells him that the pet food he took was for the street dogs. The skeleton eats a little and apologizes, saying he didn't mean to scare the young woman. He then politely asks if he can have a little of the food, leaving the young woman in shock. Terrified to see that the thing can talk, the girl screams and runs far away from there. The young man watches the scene, having expected this reaction as he's used to it. But he isn't fazed and says that at least now he can eat the pet food in peace. Even though she's scared, the student stays hidden, watching and wondering what that thing was. She starts to question if it was a person and if it's possible for someone to live in that state. With that, a possibility comes to the young woman's mind, and she wonders if he is a heart mutant. The girl remembers that mutants have bizarre abilities and that he saved her from the bad guys. Feeling guilty for her reaction, she decides to go back and approaches the skeleton again. Then, the young woman offers a sandwich that was in her backpack to the hungry young man. Surprised and moved, the survivor asks if that sandwich is really for him. The girl confirms and apologizes for running away before, and he thanks her, taking the food. He holds the sandwich and thinks that this is the first time he's received food that looks like this. The boy takes a giant bite and remembers that he had only seen wrappers for that sandwich in the trash. Upon tasting the sandwich, he is delighted and says the flavor is simply divine. He praises how fresh the vegetables, bread, and meat are, and says he could pass on happily. Looking at the student petting the dogs, the protagonist thinks that she is an angel. After a while, the student musters the courage and asks what she should call the skeleton. He then replies that his name is Geo Kim and formally introduces himself to the young woman. With a smile, the girl says it's a pleasure and reveals that her name is Hai Jae-song. Then, she asks how the young man ended up like this, and he explains that he's on the run from the lab. Frightened, Hai Jae asks about this lab and if he is really being chased. Geo confirms that there is a research center that captures mutants, and they are trying to take him back. The student is shocked because she has heard rumors and asks what they do to him in that place. The skeleton pauses and prepares to tell the truth about his dark past. He reveals that he was used in experiments and suffered for 10 years with tests and procedures. Hai Jae is horrified to learn of the cruelty he faced for an entire decade. Geo explains that all of this happened because of his resurrection heart, which regenerates him. Because of this unique ability, he survived everything, and that's why he ended up in this state. The girl looks at him with a serious and determined expression after hearing the sad story. The young man continues to lament his appearance and the suffering his power has caused him. Suddenly, the student stands up and invites him to go somewhere with her. Geo is confused when the young woman takes his hand and pulls him, saying it will be quick. He is completely in shock as he feels her hand holding his firmly. Even with his scary appearance, a girl had the courage to hold his hand. With a blushing face, the skeleton feels awkward and thinks that she caught him by surprise. Unexpectedly, his bone blade manifests again as he is pulled down the street. Halfway there, the young man's hand comes off, and the student panics as she holds the limb. With that, the girl despairs, and he tries to calm her down, saying that this happens from time to time. The skeleton explains that he just needs to line it up for the arm to stick back on, and asks where they're headed. Moments later, the young man appears in new clothes and a wig. Not quite understanding the situation, Hai Jae then explains that she bought the clothes for him to disguise himself and not attract so much attention. The girl says they are simple pieces, but should serve the purpose for a good while. Jae is moved by the gesture and says he loves the new clothes he got from the young woman. The young man feels very comfortable and says it feels like he has new skin. He gets super excited, but the student warns that the transformation isn't complete yet. The girl says that his face is still visible and that she is going to cover it all with makeup. With that, the young woman finishes the job and reveals her friend's new look with glasses and everything. Hai Jae feels a bit embarrassed, but Geo likes it, and she says that now no one will recognize him. While the girl hides her face in embarrassment, her cell phone suddenly starts to ring. She checks the time on her device and realizes she's late for her class. With that, the student says goodbye and leaves, leaving Geo alone with the dogs. Running off, she shouts for the young man to take care of the little dogs while she's away. He stands there, thinking about the name of the girl who helped him that day. That angel's name was Hai Jae-song, and he would never forget it. The dogs surround him, and he wonders if her request means she'll be back tomorrow. Then, the young man remembers that in the lab, everyone treated him like an experiment. He remembers that in the lab he was an animal, and on the street, everyone ran from him in fear. But Jae was the first person in a long time to treat him like a real human being. Lying down with the dogs, he thanks the little dog that led him to meet the student. With that, the young man asks the animal what he should call it while getting a few licks. He then suggests the name Potato and the little dog seems to like the idea and barks happily. Repeating the new name, he remembers how delicious the sandwich he received was. Gio thinks that the young woman who bought him clothes and talked to him is a true angel. Because of this, he looks forward to the next day and hopes to see her again. But suddenly, the protagonist stops smiling and realizes the harsh reality. He calls this thought foolish and understands that he can't put the girl at risk. The young man remembers that he is being hunted, and his presence could bring danger to her. With a heavy heart, the skeleton decides that the best thing to do is to leave. He feels he needs to go back to where he belongs and stay away from good people. So, the young man begins to walk alone through the dark city streets with no destination. After walking for a long time, he finds a sewer entrance near a river. Without a second thought, the young man enters that place to hide from everyone. He ends up fainting on the dirty ground and remains unconscious there for a long time. Upon waking up, the young man is startled to see that he is holding a rat by its tail. He gets up and thinks that he can't just sleep anywhere, as he passed out from exhaustion. Soon after, hunger strikes, and the protagonist feels his stomach rumble loudly. The young man knew he would get hungry, so he saved some pet food before leaving. He decides to eat it while imagining the taste of the sandwich to trick his stomach. With that, the young man eats each piece, as if it were an ingredient, and is surprised by the result. Suddenly, the protagonist hears a strange noise and becomes alert inside his hiding spot. Just then, the dog Potato jumps on him and steals the food from his hand, leaving him desperate. He scolds the animal, saying that the little dog can't eat that. No way. But something seems strange to the skeleton, and he is confused by the whole situation. Then the young man realizes that it's Potato and is shocked that he's there. He doesn't understand how the dog managed to find him in such a remote place. Soon, the young man realizes that if the little animal is there, it means someone else came with him. At that moment, he hears Hi, G's voice, and is thankful that his skull face hides his joy. The student appears with an unfriendly look and asks why he disappeared without telling her. She says she almost couldn't find him and that her joy at seeing him again would be obvious. The girl explains that she followed the scent of the dogs, which is how she found the hideout. With that, she scolds him for putting himself at risk, and he apologizes for making her worry. The young man then confesses that he was afraid of being a burden and decided to leave. With a smile, the young woman says she's very happy to have finally found him. She says that even Potato was worried, and the little dog licks his friend's face. Then the girl says they need to eat and shows a bunch of snacks she brought. Hi, Jay says she bought all of it because he only ate one sandwich the day before. The student prepares a different dessert by mixing milk with cookies and offers it to the young man. He is surprised by the mixture of cookies and milk, but the young woman assures him it's very good. The young man feels a new sensation and thinks that yesterday's food was already incredible. With that, he tries the dessert with a small spoon and wonders about the taste. The taste is so good that the young man starts to cry with emotion and says it's delicious. He gets so excited that he offers some to his friend, but she tells him to try the soda. Suddenly, while drinking the soda, his arm begins to regenerate rapidly. The student is very shocked by the scene, and he shows his arm healing right in front of her. His hand is still forming, and the girl watches the process up close, very scared. She then asks if the healing is always this slow, and if it will take days for him to become whole. The young man corrects her, saying that at this rate, a full recovery would take years, leaving her in shock. He thinks that to speed up the process, he needs to absorb a lot of a certain liquid, but decides not to scare her. So the young man changes the subject and says, this is the method using food, and she asks what the other one would be. The skeleton lies and says the other way only works in the lab, and that eating already helps. The girl asks if the lab used to help him, and he explains that they would heal him for the experiments. Because of that, they continue to chase him relentlessly, no matter where he hides. Hearing this, the student understands that this was the reason he ran away without saying anything. He confirms and says she doesn't need to be kind anymore, as their friendship is dangerous. The girl stands up, determined, and yells that they need to go to the police station right now. But the young man says the police would treat him like a monster, and that he was almost targeted before. The girl tells the young man not to worry, revealing that her older sister works as a police officer. With that, she shares an incredible secret, saying that her sister also has a mutant heart, just like him. The skeleton is completely stunned and asks if he heard correctly that the young woman's relative is a mutant. At that moment, the young man remains silent as he reflects on this unexpected revelation, looking at the ground. The student then asks for a leap of faith, assuring him that the officer is a very kind and nice person. But the survivor still seems to be processing the information, his face showing total confusion about it all. Seeing that the mood has become heavy, the girl decides to say goodbye to the animals and says she needs to leave early. Then, she gives the little animals one last pet and mentions that the shelter should contact them soon. Little Potato makes a funny face and barks happily, as if he understands the humans' entire conversation. Alone with the animal, the protagonist thanks him for his help and pets the head of his new best friend. With a determined look, the young man tells himself that this time he won't run away like a coward. He smiles and promises the little dog that he will be back soon to visit and play again in that spot. From a distance, the student waves goodbye as the young man watches her walk away and disappear over the city horizon. Putting on his hood, the young man thinks that after 3 years on the run, someone has finally reached out a hand to help him. He remembers his friend's smile and feels that having someone by his side is a very strange and new sensation. Walking down the street, the hero wonders if he can finally live in peace without having to be a perpetual fugitive. But suddenly, bright lights hit his face, and he stops in the middle of the road, unaware of the imminent danger. Seeing the scene, the girl freezes in terror, her expression changing completely as she notices the fast vehicle. With the violent impact, the skeleton's body is thrown far away, and his glasses fly off as he spins in the air. At that moment, the young man hits the asphalt hard and lies on the ground, showing no sign of reaction. A huge henchman grabs the student, covering her mouth as she tries to scream for her friend. With that, several men in suits run towards the protagonist, and one of them is holding a baseball bat. At that moment, 2 henchmen take the chance and lift the young man's body, who is still dazed. In the background, a lighter is lit, and a small flame illuminates the scene, revealing a new character. A man with a scar lights a cigarette and says that he has finally found that pathetic piece of scrap. The leader then orders them to take him, because he will pay for everything he put them through during the chase. The 3 black cars speed off, taking the captured protagonist to an unknown location. But through the car's rearview mirror, it's possible to see the skeleton being dragged by a rope around his neck. The young man coughs as he is pulled along the asphalt, and we realize that 2 other bodies are being taken along with him. With a face full of anger, the young man curses himself for being captured in such a humiliating way. He needs to stop them at any cost, so he starts digging his hands into the ground to try and stop the car. The protagonist screams that this is all his fault, and his expression shows deep despair. He blames himself because even G was dragged into this mess, and now she's trapped inside the car. The friction with the asphalt is completely destroying his hands. But the young man doesn't give up the fight. The young man coughs and continues to be dragged down the road, but he still resists with all his might. He feels powerless and realizes that with his useless ability, he can't do anything to save them. Hopeless, the young man begins to plead for help, asking for someone to please save him from this nightmare. Unexpectedly, several dogs appear out of nowhere and start jumping towards the kidnappers' cars. The little dogs, including Potato, bite the rope hard, and the protagonist is shocked by their loyalty. With that, the animals unite and pull the young man's body back in an attempt to slow down the vehicle and save him. With the combined strength of the animals, the rope finally snaps, and the young man is left behind on the asphalt. Noticing the situation, the vehicle's driver brakes sharply, skidding the tires on the road. The car comes to a complete stop, and the protagonist is left lying on the ground, surrounded by all his four-legged friends. The dogs bark and snarl, protecting the young man's injured body, who is badly hurt on the ground. Inside the vehicle, one of the kidnappers gets angry and curses when he sees that the animals are messing everything up. With that, the men in suits get out of the car and prepare to face the pack of furious dogs. One of the henchmen scoffs and asks if the mutts are crazy as the animals continue to snarl. The skeleton on the ground seems to be losing consciousness and tries to shout for his friends to stop. Losing patience, the aggressors begin to attack the little dogs with baseball bats without any mercy. With great effort, the young man tries to get up, as he can't stand to see the little animals fighting in his place. He clenches his fist and focuses, knowing he needs to do something to help his friends. At that moment, one of the dogs bites one of the men's legs with great force, even though it's injured. The protagonist gets an idea and remembers that he needs a certain liquid to regenerate faster. He decides he will absorb the fluid that was spilled on the ground to try to recover a part of his body. With that, the young man drags himself with difficulty towards a puddle of the liquid on the asphalt. But before he can reach his goal, one of the henchmen steps on his hand, preventing him from moving. The aggressor continues to attack the animals, and the young man realizes he needs to recover to be able to help. Suddenly, the protagonist looks to the side and sees Potato's body lying lifeless on the ground. The young man's face fills with horror, and his eyes go wide at the tragic scene he is witnessing. In shock, he calls out his canine friend's name and can't believe the little dog is gone. He looks around and sees the bodies of the other little dogs lying lifeless on the ground. The young man calls out his friends' names, but the scene is one of total desolation and sadness. At that moment, the young man remembers the 10 years he spent trapped in that laboratory. He lived in chains and suffered all sorts cruel experiments at the hands of the scientists. Every day they would give him a red substance and take parts from him in an unimaginable ordeal. The routine was always the same, and because of his power, he couldn't even choose when his end would come. Until one day he planned an escape and, by a miracle, managed to get out of that place. The young man thought he would finally be happy and free from that nightmare that lasted so long. But reality was very different, as the people on the outside looked down on him. Everyone felt fear and disgust at his appearance and treated him as if he were a monster. Because of this, he ended up living in isolation in the trash, feeling like an outcast. But something inside him begins to pulse with a very strange and powerful energy. Then the protagonist remembers the dogs and the student, who were the only ones to be kind. They treated him like a human being, and this awakens a hidden power within his body. With that, all the spilled liquid on the ground begins to move towards him rapidly. The red substance envelopes the young man, and a sinister energy takes over the entire area. The young man absorbs all of the fluid, and his body begins to regenerate in an incredible way. His muscles and skin form again, and he feels stronger than ever before. With that, the fluid condenses around his arm, forming a protective and very resistant layer. At that moment, a new power awakens, and his regeneration reaches a completely unbelievable level. With the power of the absorbed liquid, his hand regenerates completely in the blink of an eye. At that moment, a red and very dense energy begins to surround the protagonist's body. Then his face also recovers, and his eyes glow with a very intense red color. The young man's body returns to normal, and he regains the human appearance he had long ago. He looks at his own hand, surprised, and realizes his physique is completely different. The young man confirms that he is no longer a skeleton, and that everything is back to how it was before. He remembers when he was a child, and his unique nature already made him incredibly strong. But suddenly, the young man realizes something terrible about the origin of the substance that healed him. The liquid that regenerated him came from the little dogs who were lost trying to protect him. The henchmen are terrified by the scene and ask their boss what they should do now. The leader ignores his men's fear and advances with a knife to try and capture him. But the hero is much faster and lands a powerful punch right in the aggressor's face. The blow is so strong that it sends the henchman's body flying backward with unbelievable force. With that, the man flies and crashes into the side of the car, denting the entire bodywork. He gets stuck in the vehicle's door, completely knocked out after the surprise attack. With the path clear, the young man picks up Little Potato's body and holds it carefully. Crouching on the ground, he hugs his canine friend and mourns the loss of his companion. With a dark look, he states that he knows the most painful way for a person to pass on. The other aggressors are terrified, and he promises something terrible for whoever answers first. The scene shifts to an isolated warehouse, which appears to be the secret base for some very dangerous and cruel men. Several black cars are parked in the yard, indicating the place is full of armed and alert henchmen. Suddenly, someone pulls a dark bat off the head of a person who was being held hostage there. Hi! Jason looks around in despair, asking who these people are as she tries to understand her current situation. At that moment, the young woman realizes she's in a very sinister place, and her face fills with deep, genuine fear. Several delinquents surround the student, smiling wickedly, as if they're enjoying her panic. With that, the girl wonders where she is and why she was taken to this hideout in the middle of nowhere. She looks to the side and sees a horrible sight, strange people handling some biological samples, leaving her in total shock. But soon, one of the men grabs the young woman's hair forcefully and tells her to stop making so much noise. The group's leader approaches and asks if she happens to have several extra lives to be screaming like that. Then the villain shows a photo of the skeleton and claims she's only there for helping that darned mutant. He tells the young woman to keep her mouth shut if she wants to make it through this when it's all over. With a cruel look, the man says that nobody would care if 1 or 2 people disappeared from there today. The student freezes as she stares into the kidnapper's cold eyes, realizing he isn't joking at all. Unexpectedly, a cell phone starts ringing inside the leader's jacket pocket, interrupting the tense and scary moment. The man answers the call and asks why his subordinate is calling instead of just showing up with the target. On the other end of the line, the henchman talks about the dogs, and the villain is confused, not understanding what happened. The subordinate reports that the bone monster turned into a human, and that the animals were to blame for it all. At this, the boss gets furious and demands that the man speak clearly, so he can understand the situation. Jai overhears the conversation and wonders if the little dogs really showed up to save her friend at that moment. The boss asks over the phone if the subordinate is saying they lost the skeleton. At this, he freaks out and yells that the target was very valuable and that the henchman is useless garbage. Then the man kicks something in anger and threatens his men if they can't capture him again. Furious, he turns to the girl and asks where her friend has gone at this very moment. The villain yells that she needs to tell him everything now and complains that he lost a lot of money with the escape. Terrified, the student says she knows nothing, and the kidnapper laughs mockingly. At this, he pulls out a blade and threatens to rough her up a bit to see if her memory comes back. The young woman remembers her friend warned her about being followed, but she acted foolishly and paid no mind. With the blade near her face, she thinks about what she should do to escape this dangerous situation. Just then, the aggressor prepares to harm her, but something unexpected happens inside. Suddenly, one of the henchmen is thrown forcefully into another, and both fall to the ground, out cold. The other delinquents turn around, startled, and brace themselves for whatever has just invaded the place. At the door, the protagonist appears in human form with a very powerful and dark aura of vengeance. The group's leader turns to the entrance and is completely confused upon seeing the mysterious figure standing there. The young man's face is covered by shadows, and the villain asks who this strange boy standing at the door is. At this, one of the men approaches the youth and calls him a beggar because of his torn and dirty clothes, but the hero grabs the aggressor's neck with absurd speed and begins to squeeze with great force. The delinquent can't breathe and wonders what kind of strength the young man is using now. With a cold stare, the protagonist explains that because of them, something very bad has just happened. Then he reveals that, because of them, all the little dods were lost on that tragic night. The leader yells for his henchmen to take care of the intruder, and two of them rush to attack. With that, one of the men lands a powerful punch right in our hero's face, but he doesn't even flinch from the blow and maintains a very calm and frightening expression. Then the young man retaliates with an even stronger punch that lands squarely on the aggressor's chin. The impact is so brutal that the delinquent is thrown far away, and the protagonist keeps going. Just then, another henchman grabs him from behind and yells that he's finally got him pinned. Soon, another one joins in, and the two of them hold the young man while pulling his hair forcefully. Even though he's hurt, his eyes glow with an intense red color, and he seems stronger than ever. He then uses the momentum and throws one of the men over his shoulder with incredible strength. The boss and the others are completely shocked by the young man's display of superhuman power. The hero gets up slowly and looks at the floor with an expression of deep hatred. With his eyes glowing, he asks if they were sent by the Hermes laboratory to capture him. The student is in disbelief, and her expression changes completely as she witnesses the scene. She then realizes that boy is Geo, and is shocked by his new human appearance. The boss also understands everything and yells that the boy was the skeleton all along. He remembers the warning that he might not recognize him if he regenerated completely. Suddenly, the leader pulls out a weapon and fires at the protagonist's back, who feels the impact. The villain thanks him for coming back on his own and points the weapon at the young man's wounded body. With that, he orders his men to grab all the weapons they received as payment for the job. The henchmen obey, and they all start firing in the hero's direction without any mercy. The boss yells that they'll make a lot of money if they capture him, and tells his men to fire nonstop. With that, the young man is hit by several shots, and the villain orders them to fire until he can't regenerate. The shots keep hitting the young man's body, which is being completely pierced by the projectiles. He feels a terrible pain, and red liquid runs all over his face and torn clothes. The protagonist thinks about how his flesh is being torn apart by the projectiles passing through him. His bones are also being shattered by the rain of projectiles that won't stop. He feels that his lungs have been pierced, and because of that, he can't even breathe properly. Seeing the scene, the student despairs and screams for them to stop their cruelty. After so many shots, the hero's body finally falls to the ground, and the men celebrate his fall. The young man lies there on the ground, full of wounds, and it seems he has finally been defeated by them. But suddenly, his hand starts to move, and he touches the pool of red liquid around him. With that, the red liquid on the floor begins to be absorbed back into the young man's body. The red liquid from the defeated henchman on the floor flows toward the protagonist to heal him. At that moment, his heart of resurrection glows intensely and pulses with an absurd amount of energy. One of the henchmen notices the situation and yells desperately to the boss, warning him of the danger. The man yells that the target is coming back to life, and the young man's body begins to rise on its own. The group's leader is terrified and says he's getting up as if he were a zombie. The red liquid moves around his body and begins to heal all the wounds from the shots. Desperate, the villain orders the men to fire again and asks if they're just going to stand there watching. He feels each projectile entering his body, but this time his expression is very different. Even while taking shots to the head, he thinks that the projectiles are tearing him apart completely, but even with so many injuries, his body continues to recover in a bizarre way. But the young man realizes the pain isn't as strong as he initially imagined it would be. This is because the young man has been through much worse things in his dark past. He then remembers when he was a child and endured all sorts of torment in the laboratory. The boy was crushed by giant presses and used in cruel and inhumane tests all the time. Because of this, the protagonist claims that the experiments in that place were much more painful. Back in the present, he lands a powerful punch on the face of one of the nearby delinquents. The blow is so strong that the man is thrown far away with incredible force. With a hateful glare, The hero says that something like firearms is nothing to him now. He claims he can take this all day, and the aggressor is left with a badly bruised face. The other henchmen are terrified as they watch the young man move around with superhuman ability. However, the protagonist hits another henchman with a devastating, fast, and precise blow. The man tries to defend himself, but the force of the attack is too great, and he feels the impact of the punch. At this, the delinquent flies and crashes into a metal tank, and the hero thinks about what's driving him crazy. What angers him most is remembering the little dogs who sacrificed themselves to try and protect him. Then he unleashes his fury and starts attacking all his enemies with an absurd and fatal speed. The memory of Little Potato smiling comes to his mind, fueling his great anger even more. He continues to fight, thinking about the fact that he couldn't protect his only true friends. Seeing the chaos, the boss grabs the student and flees, yelling for the young man not to come any closer. With that, the boss threatens to shoot the student if the young man gets any closer, but the hero ignores the blackmail and lands a devastating punch right on the kidnapper's face. The blow lands squarely, and the villain feels the full force of the unexpected and brutal attack. With a look full of hatred, the young man shows that he will have no mercy for this man. He yells that he'll never be able to see his friends again, and throws the villain with a final punch. Then the man's body flies and crashes into a metal tank, which dents from the impact. The group's leader lies there, his face completely bruised after the beatdown. He looks at the protagonist with deep fear and realizes he's in serious trouble now. Terrified, the aggressor begs to be spared and promises to do anything he's told. But the young man stares at him with cold eyes and says it's far too late for any kind of forgiveness. He then lands a powerful kick right on the villain's head, who screams in pain from the attack. The impact is so strong that the ground cracks, and the man tastes red liquid in his mouth. The hero continues to attack, landing another punch with all his strength on the enemy's face. Without stopping, he delivers a sequence of rapid and brutal blows to the kidnapper's body. The speed of the punches is so great that the man can't even react in time to defend himself. After the beatdown, the villain's face is disfigured, and the young man observes the scene coldly. Red liquid drips from the protagonist's hand, which is injured after so many blows. He stands over the defeated body of the boss, who no longer moves on the dirty floor. The camera pulls back, and we see all the henchmen down and the warehouse in a state of total chaos. The young man takes a deep breath, and vapor comes out of his mouth, indicating the battle is finally over. With the battle over, the student calls her friend's name, her voice a little shaky and relieved. Then the young man starts walking toward her, his bare feet on the dirty warehouse floor. He continues to approach, and the girl watches him with a concerned expression on her face. The young man stops in front of his friend, who is still sitting on the floor, and looks at him, not knowing what to say. The young woman asks if he's okay, as she remembers he took many shots before falling to the ground. Suddenly, the hero drops to his knees and hugs the student tightly, surprising her with his action. With tears in his eyes, the young man feels relieved to see that his friend is safe and sound with him. Haiji says she's so happy he's alive and hugs him back affectionately at that moment. He then confesses with a sad voice that the dogs passed away to save him from that cowardly attack. The young man says he was so scared that she might get hurt in all the confusion too. Because of this, he repeats that he's so happy she's alive, and the hug gets even tighter. Confused, the girl wonders why he's thanking her at such a difficult and strange moment. With her hand on his chest, she can feel how shaken her friend is by the whole situation. The student says she's the one who should be thanking him for saving her life in there. At the scene, the police arrive, and the detective shouts for the officers to take the suspects to the station right away. At that moment, one of the henchmen who survived the brawl is handcuffed by an officer as he lowers his head in defeat. The warehouse is full of criminals, and the investigators wonder how so much destruction occurred in an internal dispute. From a distance, the pair watches the police cars move, and the girl wonders if they shouldn't be investigated too. But the young woman explains that her sister told them to stay away because things get complicated when mutants are involved. So they decide to leave and let the older woman handle the whole mess under the light of the full moon. Unexpectedly, the student starts to cry loudly because of the tragedy she has just witnessed. The young man can't hold it in either and starts to sob while hiding his face in his hands, overcome with deep sadness. He looks at the little dogs lying on the ground and apologizes for not being able to protect his small friends. The hero remembers the name of each of the animals who gave their lives for him and feels an enormous emptiness in his heart. With that, the young woman hugs one of the pets and says it's all her fault, as the little animals only wanted to save her from the bad guys. She regrets not taking better care of them and cries, thinking that the brief moments of affection became everything to the dogs. At this, the protagonist bites his own finger hard and states that it's not her fault because the animals passed away for him. The student is in shock and asks what her friend is doing when she sees the wound he caused himself. But the young man explains that he can heal with blood and wonders if his special fluid could bring his friends back. With a determined look, he lets the red liquid drip onto the animal's body, hoping for a miracle. The young man focuses all his will on this unusual plan, hoping his mutant nature can achieve the impossible. Even in pain, he continues to injure his own hand and wonders why the regeneration is acting so fast now. He bites even harder as the red liquid flows, and the hero seems to completely ignore the physical pain he's feeling. Seeing his sacrifice, his friend holds his arm and asks him to stop, as the little dogs would be even sadder to see that. With a sad face, he wonders if the dogs don't hate him for passing away because of him. But his friend holds his hand and explains how much the little animals truly loved him. She tells him that at first they were very skittish and didn't like people, but with him it was different. The young man is surprised and wonders if they really were suspicious of all humans. The young woman confirms this, saying they had many scars from mistreatment and bad memories. While petting one of the pets, he admits he had no idea, as he thought they were just gentle. Because of this, the girl asks him not to blame himself, as that would break their hearts too. The protagonist sits there with one of the animals on his lap, thinking about everything he's heard. With a smile, the young woman says that the fact they approached him without hesitation like that probably means they sensed that their friend was in a situation similar to their own. The young man then thanks her for the comforting words, and the two remain silent for a moment. Suddenly, a soft whimper catches the pair's attention, and they look in the direction of the sound. At that moment, Potato's puppy appears, and the student is very relieved to see he survived. Without understanding, they watch the little dog walk slowly toward them in the clearing. The puppy stops right in front of the young man and wags its tail while staring intently at him. With that, the hero asks the little one if he doesn't hate him, since his family was lost because of him. But in response, the little animal licks the young man's hand as if to say everything is okay. The young man is touched by the scene, and his friend comments that it seems the puppy really likes him too. Suddenly, the little dog falls asleep in the hero's arms, and she says he must be very tired. The student then thinks about what to do, and considers taking the newborn home with her. The young woman thinks about what to do with her friend and the puppy, since the guys from the lab are not normal. With that, she asks him to wait a bit, and runs to call her sister for help. On the phone, the young woman explains the situation and asks where they should go now that everything is over. After the call, the two walk through the city, and the young man holds the little puppy carefully. They then arrive at a large apartment building that seems to be the home of the student and her family. Upon entering, the young man looks around the house, and his friend tells him to come in and make himself completely at home. But he hesitates at the door, wondering if it's right for someone as dangerous as him to enter her house. The student smiles and says he risked his life to protect her, so there's no reason to be afraid. Besides, she reveals that her sister wants to meet him because he might be able to help with a case about the lab. So the young woman convinces him to come inside, and the protagonist finally accepts his friend's invitation. At this, he sees his own reflection in a window and gets confused by the image he's seeing. Suddenly, the hero has a breakdown and gets scared by what he sees, startling the girl with his reaction. He then grabs his friend's shoulders and yells that his face is back, with cheeks, a nose, and even lips. The young man explains that he didn't know because his face hadn't regenerated since his childhood in the lab. With his hands on the glass, he stares at himself and realizes he's finally seeing his true appearance. Shocked by the story, the young woman drinks some water and says something has been bothering her for a while. She then asks his age, because now that he's regenerated, he doesn't look like an old man at all. The young man becomes thoughtful and says it's been so long that he doesn't even remember thinking about his own age. He remembers entering the lab at 7 years old and escaping 3 years after 7 annual tests. After doing the math, the young man says he's 17 years old, and his friend spits out her water, surprised by the revelation. The girl is shocked and asks why he let her call him sir, if they're the same age. With a blushing face, the young man explains that he was just happy she treated him like a human being. The student is left completely speechless upon hearing her friend's sincere and sad answer. At this, she thinks the situation is a bit pitiful, but at the same time she finds his attitude very cute. So the young woman suggests they call each other by their names and invites him to eat after a shower. Meanwhile, the little puppy takes the opportunity to devour his bowl of food with great enthusiasm. At the table, the protagonist, now in clean clothes, prepares for his first real meal. With wide eyes, he tries the food and shouts that everything is warm and delicious. His friend gets embarrassed and says it's just a simple dish, apologizing for not being a good cook. But the young man insists, stating that this is the best food he has ever tasted in his entire life. The young woman then explains that her sister had something unexpected come up and won't be able to meet them today as planned. With the plates completely empty, it's clear how hungry the young man was, and how much he enjoyed the dinner. Because of this, she points to the couch and says he can sleep there tonight to rest. She hands a blanket to her friend, who feels awkward but thanks her for her hospitality. With a smile, the student says goodbye and mentions she's going to her room to do her homework. Then the bedroom door closes, and the young man is left alone in the living room for the first time. Holding the blanket, he observes his surroundings, still getting used to his new reality. His eyes analyze every detail of the house, and he is amazed by the normality of it all. The hero is startled when he sees the television and wonders how it can be so big and thin. Seeing the flowers in a vase, he thinks about how different this place is from the cold, lifeless laboratory. He lies down on the couch and is surprised by how comfortable it is, much softer than his bed at the lab. Meanwhile, the little dog drinks some water but ends up throwing up a bit of the food he ate earlier. The puppy seems to be very sick, and the protagonist turns around, startled by the scene. At this, the hero realizes what happened and looks at his little friend with a shocked expression. The little animal continues to bring up his food and seems very weak and frail. Desperate, the young man yells the puppy's name, his face overflowing with pure worry. With that, he runs toward the puppy to try and help in some way during that tense moment. The young man stops in front of the little one, who just stares at him with a confused expression, not understanding. But suddenly, the little animal seems perfectly fine and just tilts its head to the side. The hero then realizes it was nothing serious and feels relieved, thinking it was a false alarm. Later, the two lie down on the couch, and the puppy snuggles up next to him in a very cute way. With the puppy on his shoulder, he thinks about how warm and cozy this place is for sleeping peacefully. Smiling, the young man asks his new companion if he's also enjoying their new safe home. Then he starts thinking of a name, and since the father was Potato, he suggests the name French Fry. The hero decides to call him Fry, and the little one seems to really like the name as he gets a pat. With that, he finally understands what happiness is, and falls asleep feeling a warmth in his heart. His memories of that day flash through his mind, and he remembers the meal he ate earlier. He also recalls the warm shower he was able to take for the first time in a long while. The memory of being able to wash with warm water makes him very happy and grateful for that moment of peace. And finally, he remembers that he can now sleep peacefully in a very comfy place like this. While sleeping peacefully, he has a nightmare and thinks about how fragile happiness is. With a sad smile, he reflects that all of this can be lost very easily. He then remembers escaping from the lab with other mutants who were running in desperation. Back then, he and his companions ran toward the exit, hoping to finally be free. But the guards of the facility appear and say they can't lose those valuable mutants. Suddenly, an explosion happens, and two of the fugitives are thrown with brutal force. The hallway floor breaks, and the young people fall amidst the rubble with no chance of escape. One of the soldiers readies himself and points an energy weapon in the direction of the mutants on the ground. The tip of the weapon glows with an intense light, preparing to fire a devastating attack. But the shot is deflected and hits the guards themselves, who are caught by surprise by the attack. The other soldiers are completely shocked by what just happened right in front of them. At that moment, a girl with black hair uses her ice powers to attack the enemies. On the floor, The protagonist seems to be in shock, and the young woman yells for him to wake up from his trance. Meanwhile, one of the boys uses his powers to hold the floor together, preventing everyone from falling. With a determined look, he does his best to protect his friends from that deadly trap. The skeleton then looks forward with new determination and finally prepares to act. The girl extends her hand to him and yells for them to hurry, as the exit was very close. The young man then takes his friend's hand, and the two prepare to continue their desperate escape. He remembers how hard they ran, but they ended up getting separated in the end. Back in the present, the young man opens his eyes, and the nightmare finally comes to its sad end. Lying in bed, he thinks about his friends from the lab and wonders if they are suffering somewhere. Because of this, he swears he won't let anyone take away the small peace he has now found. His scars glow faintly, and he reinforces his promise to protect his new friend at all costs. With that, his mutant heart pulses strongly, and he decides to fight for this newfound happiness. With a serious look, the young man warns that if anyone tries to ruin his moment of peace and quiet, he won't let it slide, and will do whatever it takes to get revenge on whoever dares to do so. The next day, a desperate scream echoes through the city, catching the attention of everyone around. Someone is running hurriedly through the streets, and their quick footsteps indicate that something very serious has happened. At this moment, we see the protagonist running and shouting the name of his little puppy, Fry. With tears in his eyes, the young man yells desperately and asks where his only friend has gone. The student announces she's leaving for school, and the young man becomes curious upon hearing such an unfamiliar term. At this, the girl explains that her sister only comes back at night and asks him to take good care of the house during the day. Then the young woman says goodbye, and the hero thinks that this school thing must be a lot of fun. Suddenly, she notices that little French Fry is whimpering and scratching the wall with great enthusiasm. With that, the two observe the little animal's strange behavior as he keeps making noise in the corner. Curious, the student asks if the pet wants to go out, and the young man notices the animal doesn't seem sick, just bored. So the protagonist decides he's going to take his little companion for a walk on the street right now. Even so, his friend shows concern and asks if the dangerous men aren't still after him out there. With a smile, the young man states that everything is fine because no one will recognize his new human face. Relieved, the young woman agrees with his argument and feels more at ease, knowing the hero is safe now. At this, the girl points to the drawer where the leash is and gives him the door code so he can go out. Once outside, the young man tries to control the little animal, who starts jumping and barking non-stop on the street. With great difficulty, the young man tries to hold the pet and realizes that walking a dog is quite complicated. Seeing little Fry struggle, he wonders if the accessory around its neck is making his friend uncomfortable. The hero worries as he notices the animal's whining and becomes afraid that he tightened the leash too much. At that moment, the young man covers his face and remembers when he himself was held by heavy chains. In a flashback, the boy recalls the torment in the lab, where he received terrible shocks while tied up. Because of this trauma, he thinks other people might not like the animal and gets lost in thought. Then the protagonist lets go of the leash and apologizes to the little animal, who disappears from sight in an instant. Suddenly, the young man goes into total shock and desperately realizes that little French Fry has run away from him on the street. The hero screams desperately for the little animal's name as he runs through the streets hoping to find him soon. Tears run down his face, and he wonders where his only companion has gone in such a tense moment. The journey of the resurrected boy continues, now with the disappearance of the pet that turned his world upside down. He then runs past several people on the sidewalk and begs for the pet to answer his urgent call. At this, the young man starts rummaging through trash cans and looks into every dark hole, his heart pounding hard. He then kneels down to look under abandoned debris, but only finds a few scared little mice there. Desperate, the young man checks behind a huge dumpster and continues his frantic search throughout the strange neighborhood. Just then, he sits on the ground and starts to cry, wondering how he'll find the puppy in such a huge place. Lost in thought, the hero imagines the worst and is terrified by the idea of the pet being run over by a truck. But his fear grows even more when he thinks that mean people could capture and hurt his little friend. The young man cries bitterly and blames himself for losing the pet just one day after promising he would always protect him. Suddenly, he stops in an alley and sees a building in the distance that seems to be the school his friend mentioned earlier. Looking at the field, he sees some students playing ball, and finally spots the little dog hidden among the bushes. Little Fry is calmly licking his paw in the middle of the thicket, with no idea of the worry he caused his owner. Then the protagonist runs at full speed toward the thicket, wondering if the pet followed the girl's scent. Unexpectedly, a man passing by gets confused and looks to the side, trying to understand what's happening. With that, the young man flies past the man who tries to grab him but can't even touch the rushed youth's clothes. The instructor is in total shock and wonders how someone can be so fast as he watches the blur go by. The hero continues his desperate run, and the man yells for him to wait, but his only focus is on rescuing his pet. Meanwhile, the students continue their soccer game, unaware that a powerful mutant is now invading the premises. With that, we see the students having fun in the courtyard, while the atmosphere at the school seems lively and peaceful. In the bleachers, some students are resting and chatting about the day's gossip in a very relaxed way. Hidden behind a tree, the hero observes the area cautiously so as not to be noticed by anyone at that moment. Just then, he focuses his gaze on a specific group, trying to catch every detail of their seemingly important conversation. Soon, the young people start discussing the origin of mutants, and whether the rumors about the lab are actually real. One of the boys shows on his phone that the reward for a captured mutant is as high as 1 billion won. Hearing the astronomical amount, the protagonist realizes how people on the outside see his kind merely as a commodity. With that, the young man decides he needs to find the puppy quickly and get out of there before something bad happens to him. Meanwhile, Little Fry runs happily across the courtyard, with no idea of the danger that now surrounds him. In another corner of the school, some girls are recording a dance challenge to post on their social media with great excitement. After finishing the recording, they check the video and praise each other's beauty while smiling a lot. Then the group's leader looks at her phone, very proud of the result, as her friends continue with their exaggerated compliments. Unexpectedly, the little animal appears, running towards the young women, who are surprised by the cute and furry visitor. Charmed, they pick up the pet and start showering him with affection because he's so small and adorable. At this, the students decide to take a picture with their new friend to post on their stories and get lots of clicks that afternoon. But when they see the result of the picture, they notice a dark figure right behind them and let out a scream of pure terror. Terrified, the young women accuse the hero of being a weird stalker who was secretly taking pictures of them. Embarrassed, the young man steps out from behind the tree and apologizes, explaining that he was just looking for his pet. With a very shy expression, the young man states that he didn't mean to scare anyone and just wants his puppy back soon. At that moment, the girl's attitude changes, and they start to blush upon noticing that the puppy's owner is actually very handsome. With that, the young women look at his clothes and realize he must be a new student, since they've never seen him at school before. Then the young man asks if he interrupted their video, and the group's leader asks if he wants to be in the recording too. At this, the other students giggle and say he's very cute, while the hero insists he can't appear in videos at all. But the girl ignores his comment and holds out her phone, asking for his social media handle so they can follow each other. With the puppy in her arms, she says she'll tag his profile in the post, and her friends watch the situation closely. The young women comment among themselves that this is the first time their friend has asked for someone's contact info and say the guy really has a handsome face. Just then, the hero gets confused, not understanding what a photo app is, and the girls say her account is very famous around there. With a sly look, the young woman thinks the new guy is pretty cute and that his shyness makes him a perfect accessory for her to use. But the protagonist backs away and confesses that he doesn't have any kind of social media, leaving the girls baffled by his answer. At that moment, the group's leader freezes and wonders if she heard correctly what the young man just told her. Then the young man bows and thanks her for the invitation, but states that he has to decline and apologizes for causing trouble. Her friends are in total shock and comment that they can't believe the most popular girl in school just got rejected like that. With that, the young woman gets furious and thinks the hero is playing hard to get, as it's impossible for someone not to want her contact info. Unexpectedly, the young man takes Little Fry back and says he's taking the pet home, while the student seethes with anger inside. He hugs the pet and apologizes for getting lost, promising it will never happen again. But in the distance, a red-haired delinquent watches everything and becomes possessed with rage at the scene he's witnessing in the courtyard. The bully's friends are also watching and wonder who that strange guy talking to their boss's girlfriend is. With that, one of the youths asks if that isn't his girl, and the guy confirms with a very scary and heavy stare. The hero continues to pet the little animal, not realizing that the gang of troublemakers is watching his every move. The villain grinds his teeth in fury and thinks the protagonist is hitting on his girlfriend right in front of his eyes. With that, the delinquent asks for the ball from one of his buddies, who doesn't understand the reason for the sudden request. But the bully ignores him and prepares to kick with all his might while his friend screams in desperation at the scene. The kick is so powerful that the ball completely deforms from the absurd impact of the blow. With that, the object flies toward the target, and the aggressor states that he doesn't care one bit about the consequences. Then the ball goes straight toward the protagonist, who is holding Little Fry, and is surprised by the unexpected attack. But instead of dodging, he stops the object with his face and stares at the enemy with a very cold and threatening look. His serious expression shows that he won't let this cowardly and unprovoked attack slide. With that, the little puppy remains completely safe in its owner's arms, who bravely protected it from the blow. The impact is so strong that it kicks up dust, but the hero doesn't even move from his spot, and the girls are shocked by the scene. Just then, one of the students approaches, concerned, and asks if he's okay after that ball to the face. But suddenly, red liquid starts dripping onto the ground, and the young woman screams in fear upon seeing his injury. The aggressor approaches, feigning concern, and says it was an accident because he didn't mean to hit anyone with the ball. With a fake smile, he apologizes for the mistake, and his girlfriend asks if the young man was badly hurt by the blow. Then the bully tells the young man to be more careful next time, and the hero just stares at him in silence for a moment. With his nose bleeding, the protagonist says the puppy almost got hurt, and demands a formal apology. The delinquent starts laughing out loud and points to the hero's nose, which is now bleeding from both sides non-stop. But he quickly shuts up when he remembers his girlfriend is watching and that he needs to maintain his good guy image in front of her. So he changes his attitude and asks if the young man is okay, suggesting he go to the nurse's office as soon as possible. But the young man repeats that the pet is what's important and that the aggressor should be more careful the next time he kicks the ball. He then states that everything is fine because the other guy apologized, and the bully is left completely confused by that calm reaction. So the hero leaves, and one of the bullies comments that he took the kick well, but the boss tells him to shut up. Angrily, the leader tells his henchmen to find out who the new guy is, because he has developed a deadly hatred for that young man. Walking down the street, the young man thinks about the scare he had, but is happy to have found his puppy. He also smiles because, thanks to the pet, he got to see a school and watch people his age having fun. With a smile, the young man wonders if he would have made many friends if he had studied in a place like that. Suddenly, the aggressor from before calls him friend, and the hero turns around, not understanding the approach. Then the bully puts his arm around him and apologizes for what happened on the field earlier with the ball. The redhead says they're in the same grade, so now they're friends, and the protagonist is very confused by this. At this, the aggressor offers to buy him a snack as an apology, and the young man doesn't understand what he means. But upon hearing the word bread, the hero's eyes light up, as he has never eaten anything like it in his entire life. He asks if he's serious, and the bully takes him, saying he knows a place with delicious bread nearby. Then the young man asks if there will be anything for Fry to eat, and the aggressor promises to buy whatever he wants. The redhead thinks the young man must have been hungry from trying to look cool in front of the girls earlier. Suddenly, the bully sticks his foot out in front of the hero, intending to trip him to the ground. With that, the young man trips and falls hard while the aggressor just watches the scene with a cruel look. On the ground, he sees other guys and realizes he's fallen into a trap while protecting the small animal. One of the henchmen then mocks him for falling for the free snack story so easily. The other bullies wonder if the new guy is a bit foolish for believing the story about the bread. The boss says he's going to feed him a knuckle sandwich, and we see several other students lying beaten there. Surrounded on all sides, the protagonist faces the gang, and the leader insults him for being a pathetic weakling. The gang leader gets annoyed and asks why the new guy is starting trouble with him there. Calmly, the young man asks what he means, and the aggressor yells that he was hitting on his girlfriend. With that, the bully threatens him, saying that a guy like him would cry with just one good punch. The other delinquents mock the hero, and the gang leader insults him for bringing a dog to school. The protagonist covers his face and thinks he was invited to be friends, but it was actually just a fight. He then apologizes for the trouble and tries to leave, but the redhead prepares to attack him from behind. At this, the henchmen block his path and mock his attempt to escape the ambush. With a serious look, the young man tells them to get out of the way because they're scaring his little pet. One of the aggressors gets annoyed by his attitude and lunges at the young man to teach him a lesson right now. But the hero retaliates with a well-aimed punch that lands squarely on the enemy's chin, knocking him out instantly. The delinquent falls unconscious to the ground, and the others are shocked to see the mysterious boy's strength. The gang leader's face turns pale, and he can't believe what just happened right in front of him. Furious, the other henchmen advance together to try and surround and attack the protagonist at the same time. They wonder how the new guy managed to take down their friend with just one swift and precise blow. But the young man just stares at them with his cold eyes and prepares for the fight that's about to begin. At that moment, his mutant heart pulses with a dark energy, and his power begins to awaken. Then the young man dodges their attacks and hits his enemies with superhuman speed and strength. Without giving the aggressors a chance, he continues to deliver precise blows and knocks them down one by one. With a final punch, he hits the leader's face, who can't even react in time to defend himself. Then the hero ends the fight by throwing the gang leader over his shoulder with immense force. With a single blow, the hero smashes the aggressor's head into the brick wall, which cracks from the force of the impact. He then warns them that he told them to stop because Little Fry was getting very scared of all the commotion. The other students watching from a distance are terrified to see the damage the new guy caused to the wall. With that, they scream that the young man is a monster and run away, afraid of his superhuman and bizarre strength. The delinquent on the ground looks at the wall and can't believe it's cracking from the force of the punch. Terrified, the bully realizes he's in trouble and thinks that a single blow from that guy would break all his bones. He then understands that he messed with the wrong person, and his face contorts with pure fear and desperation at that moment. Desperate, the redhead bows on the ground and begs for forgiveness, promising he'll never start trouble again. He then tries to get out of it by showing a picture of his own puppy to prove he also loves animals and didn't want to hurt the pet. The hero looks thoughtful, and the aggressor begs to be forgiven, while the young man seems to consider the flimsy excuse. The delinquent continues to show his phone, and the whole scene seems very strange, with the bully suddenly trying to be friendly. Suddenly, the young man's stomach rumbles, and he says he used a bit of strength and is now very hungry because of it. The redhead is completely confused and wonders why the new guy is thinking about food at a time like this. At this, the aggressor believes the young man is a clever guy who is subtly asking for food in exchange for his forgiveness. The scene then changes to his friend in the classroom. Moments later, they arrive at the school's convenience store to finally buy the hero's promised snack. With the table full of food, the protagonist gives thanks and prepares for the feast, while the other just watches from a distance. The young man starts to devour everything eagerly, and the bully watches from afar, still trying to understand the whole situation. He even shares a bit of his bread with Little Fry, who barks happily and seems to like the strawberry filling of the snack. With that, the redhead becomes confused because the young man seems strong but acts like a fool, and he can't understand his personality. The aggressor remembers the young man sent one of his guys flying with just one punch, and wonders if he's an athlete. But he dismisses the idea because not even a professional fighter could crack a wall with someone's head. Because of this, he decides he needs to take drastic measures and calls his boss, asking for help with the situation. In an underground casino, the so-called boss answers the call and asks what his subordinate wants with him right now. Desperate, the redhead begs for help and says he's in a very complicated situation and needs backup. On the other end of the line, the man complains that he's only sought after when someone gets beaten up and calls him useless for it. Then the young man begs once more and asks him to save his reputation just this once, so he won't be embarrassed. The boss agrees to help and tells his friends that one of his henchmen got beaten up by a new kid at school. He scoffs at the situation but says he's bored and will stop by to see what's happening. The bully is relieved and thanks him, promising he'll have the target ready for when the backup arrives. With a malicious smile, the redhead hangs up the phone and swears the transfer student will regret ever being born. Suddenly, the hero offers one of his snacks to the aggressor, who is surprised by the young man's unexpected gesture. The young man says he feels bad eating everything by himself, and the other refuses the offer, saying he can have it all. With that, the bully hands all the snacks to him and says he can keep the drinks and everything else he bought. The young man is happy and shares the food with his puppy, while the redhead wonders how someone so strong can be so naive. He watches the young man feeding his pet and notices something strange on his hand, which seems suddenly healed. Then the aggressor remembers he punched the wall, but now his hand is perfectly fine, as if nothing had happened. He starts connecting the dots and realizes the young man has superhuman strength and very fast regeneration. Remembering a video, the redhead recalls that heart mutants can have different abilities depending on their form. Suddenly, he's startled by the possibility and asks if the young man is a mutant, but the puppy ends up throwing up everything. The protagonist panics and denies the accusation, but the aggressor is sure that he's a real mutant. With that, the bully is shocked, as this is the first time he's seen a being like that in real life, and he looks normal. He then remembers that heart mutants are dangerous and becomes afraid of what might happen to him now. The redhead thinks his boss will get beaten up for nothing if he comes to the school, and the man yells from the other end of the line. On the phone, he warns his subordinate that the young man next to him is a very dangerous and powerful mutant. The aggressor says the situation is serious and that they should call off the plan, but the boss has another idea in mind. So the man tells him to hold the target no matter what, because a mutant is too valuable to be left behind. The young man finishes eating and says he's leaving, but the bully needs to keep him there until the backup arrives. With that, the redhead panics and asks why he's leaving already when there's still time before the break is over. The hero smiles and explains that he needs to go home, making the aggressor even more nervous about the situation. Desperate, the bully needs a plan to stall the young man and prevent him from leaving before the right time. So he suggests they skip class to have some fun outside of school, and the protagonist is curious about the proposal. They arrive at an arcade, and the hero is amazed by the lights and sounds of such a different place. The young man walks around the place, and the bully realizes it's the young man's first time in a place like this. With his eyes sparkling, the protagonist says he didn't know places like this existed, and the redhead is shocked by the revelation. He observes everything with great attention and is impressed by every detail of this new technological world. Suddenly, the hero sees a claw machine and recognizes the plush toy his friend has on her backpack. The aggressor is in disbelief and wonders what the young man has been doing with his life to have never seen a claw machine. So he offers to pay for a game, and the young man gets excited about the chance to try and get the toy. With the bully's help, the protagonist controls the claw and is amazed to see the mechanism moving to grab the plushie. With a perfect move, the young man manages to grab the plush toy and celebrates his achievement with a shout of joy. He then hugs the toy, happy to have gotten the same one his friend has on her backpack. The bully watches it all and thinks that stalling the young man until the boss arrives won't be a problem at all. He then points to a karaoke place and asks if the hero has ever been to a place like that in his life. The two sit down, and the aggressor explains that there they can sing their favorite songs and have a lot of fun. The young man feels awkward and confesses that he doesn't know any songs, leaving the other quite surprised by the revelation. With that, he begins to sing a lullaby about a picnic and cotton candy that his mother taught him. The redhead gets annoyed and asks why he's singing a children's song in a place like that. But the young man explains that it's the only song he knows because he was separated from his family when he was a child. He reveals that he hasn't had a normal life since then and therefore never had time to learn other songs. The bully is shocked by the story and starts to feel bad about the young man's sad past, who seems so alone. He wonders if heart mutants are always so different and begins to change his opinion about the young man. With a pitiful expression, the aggressor feels his heartache and realizes he's getting attached to the mysterious boy. He then offers the hero money and says he's going to show him a whole new world starting right now. Suddenly, the two start playing a drum game with great energy, and the redhead shouts for him to hit it faster. In another fighting game, the protagonist uses his foot to play, and the bully complains that he's using dirty tricks. But in a dancing game, the hero gets all clumsy and ends up falling on the floor with the puppy in his arms. The aggressor laughs at his friend's clumsiness, and the two have fun together, passing the time in the lively arcade. Outside, the two are breathing heavily, and the redhead comments that they played like crazy in there. The protagonist agrees and says it was the first time he'd had so much fun, and the bully happily drinks some water. At this, the redhead notices something strange and stops everything he's doing while gripping his water bottle tightly. With a nervous smile, he looks at his phone and wonders who could be calling him at such an inconvenient time. But when he answers the phone, he gets an earful from his boss, who yells at him to answer the call faster next time. Then the delinquent remembers that he was supposed to be holding the young man for his master to teach him a lesson right now. At that moment, the young man looks at the pictures they took together and realizes he acted like a complete idiot during their outing. He sees the picture of the two of them making funny poses and notices that he ended up forming a real bond with his target. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues to play with his little pet, unaware of the betrayal being planned. The scene shifts to the dark alley where the gang of criminals impatiently awaits the arrival of the young mutant with his pet. With great fear, the redhead bows before the leader and apologizes 1,000 times for failing his mission earlier today. But the master gets furious and asks if the subordinate is trying to mess with him in this sinister place. At this, the aggressor starts to sweat and thinks his change of heart isn't just because of his new human friend. He looks at the hero sitting with the puppy and understands that this little creature is the only family the young man has in his life. With his face in his hands, the delinquent feels terrible and says that this whole situation is just too sad for him. Then the man shows a picture of his own little animal and says he perfectly understands the pain of losing a faithful companion. Crying hard, the young man sits next to the protagonist and regrets almost letting his friends hurt the little dog. At that moment, he gets it into his head that he needs to protect the pet from any danger that might arise right now. With that, the young man decides to face his gang, but soon realizes that the leader has completely lost his patience with him. Suddenly, the boss lands a brutal punch on the redhead's face, who is thrown to the side with the extreme force of the blow. Lying on the ground, the subordinate trembles in pain as the villain approaches to continue the cowardly assault against him. Finally, the man grabs the traitor by the hair and yells Taigu's name, making it clear that his punishment has only just begun. The boss pulls the redhead's hair and asks with great anger where the mutant is hiding now. With that, he remembers how much fun he had with the boy at the arcade and realizes his friend is just a normal kid. At this, the other henchmen surround the young man with bats and iron pipes, ready to do something very malicious. At that moment, the masked criminals observe the scene with cold stares as they await orders from the gang's leader. Then the brute asks if the subordinate thinks the whole gang gathered there just to waste time with lies. But Taigu desperately pleads, stating that it's all just a big misunderstanding about the target they're looking for. He remembers the young man passed out from exhaustion after playing just 2 games and seemed like a common loser. With a bleeding face, the delinquent insists the hero is just trash and apologizes for the villain having come all this way. Just then, the leader scratches his head suspiciously and asks if the redhead is really claiming the boy isn't there. With that, the aggressor puts a fake arm around the young man and asks if he's upset about getting a few slaps from his big brother. Then the man lights a cigarette and says that the subordinate's face gives away all the lies he's trying to tell now. At this, the villain demands to know the real reason the delinquent is suddenly changing his story about the mutant's whereabouts. The young man sweats, thinking that the hero isn't human, and knowing how much the world hates these different beings. With that, the boss starts laughing loudly and asks if the boy was really worried about his safety at that moment. But the redhead remains silent, as he realizes the situation is getting more and more dangerous for him. Unexpectedly, the villain raises his hand and offers 5 million as a reward if he hands over the target right now. With a cruel smile, he reveals that he even has a buyer ready to take the boy to the lab without a trace. The delinquent is in total shock and wonders if what his master is doing isn't actual human trafficking. He recalls the news on his phone about mutants being sold to the government and realizes it's all real and cruel. At that moment, his hand starts to tremble on the ground, and he understands that his superior is a much worse monster than he ever imagined. Even on the ground, the redhead tries to insist that the hero is nothing special, but the boss doesn't believe him at all. With that, the villain loses his patience and lands a powerful kick right in the subordinate's stomach, who didn't see it coming. The impact is so strong that the young man flies and crashes into a wall with brutal and unexpected violence. Lying on the ground, he's in a lot of pain and can barely breathe after that powerful blow that knocked the wind out of him. Furious, the leader complains that he's let a lot of things slide, but now his patience has finally run out for good. He then stomps on the delinquent's head with all his might and calls him frustrating for lying to him. At this, the man orders his henchmen to beat the traitor until he finally tells the whole truth about the mutant. The other aggressors obey and start kicking the young man's body without any mercy in that moment of fury. The young man tries to protect himself, but the blows are many and hit his entire body without stopping for a second. He then remembers the past and when he was just a child being beaten up by other school bullies. Back then, the little boy begged them to stop, but they continued with their cruel and cowardly assaults. Suddenly, his future boss appears and asks why those new kids were beating up a friend of his like that. Scared, the aggressors flee, and the man tells the young man to come with them because he's part of the gang now. The little boy looks at him with admiration, and the leader calls him by name, asking if he was okay after everything. In another memory, the man teaches him how to fight and says he's his older brother from now on in that family. He used to think his master was loyal, a good fighter, and that he never left anyone behind back then. But back in the present, the redhead continues to get beaten, and his admiration for the boss seems to have completely vanished. The delinquent recalls that he wanted to be like his older brothers because they seemed so cool and strong before. The villain wonders if the young man doesn't know anything, and says he can see the lie in his eyes from a mile away. Then the leader stares at him and says the young man has loyalty, and that's pretty cool of him in the end. Even all beaten up, the redhead tries to insist the hero isn't worth anything, and asks the boss to believe him. But the leader explains that selling the target on his own would only get him a few bucks, and that he's not smart. The man says loyalty is worthless if his body gets destroyed, and asks a henchman to bring a chain. With the chain in his hand, he reminds the young man that his dream was to live a cool and stylish life with his friends. Then the villain states that making a lot of money without feeling ashamed is the coolest way to live in this world. With a malicious smile, he says the two of them can live cool lives together if the young man cooperates with the plan. But the delinquent calls him boss and apologizes, but his expression shows he's made an important decision. With that, the young man states that his master isn't being cool at all, and faces him with a look of pure disappointment and sadness. He himself is surprised by what he said, and wonders why he's saying these things to such a dangerous man. At this, the boss's expression changes completely, and he understands that his subordinate really has betrayed him for the boy. Terrified, the redhead tries to apologize and says he said it all without thinking, but the villain doesn't seem to want to hear any more. With a hateful glare, the leader tells the traitor to perish, and prepares to land a fatal blow with his chained hand. But suddenly, a hand appears and grabs the aggressor's fist with incredible strength, stopping his devastating attack. The boss is shocked, and notices the chain is thick and full of welding marks, making it a dangerous weapon. He knows a blow from that would leave a huge scar, and sees the hero holding his arm effortlessly. The other henchmen are completely confused, and wonder who this new guy is who appeared out of nowhere to ruin everything. With his face all bruised, the redhead asks how his friend managed to find him in that hidden and dangerous alley. Then the protagonist explains that he came looking for him because he wasn't coming home, and he got very worried about him. With tears in his eyes, the injured young man yells for his friend to run, because these people are dangerous acquaintances of his. But the young man reveals that he was actually the one who called the gang to teach Gio a lesson, and feels very guilty. The redhead continues, revealing that he also told them Gio was a mutant, and the hero wonders why. With his face all bruised, he grinds his teeth in pain and regret for having betrayed his new friend. He then confesses that he did it all because he was angry about getting beaten up by the young man earlier at school. But the protagonist says that's not why, and asks why his friend is getting beaten with that heavy chain. The gang leader watches the scene with a malicious look, and seems to be enjoying all the confusion. At this, the delinquent is in total shock and can't believe the young man is worried about him. Suddenly, One of the henchmen takes advantage of the distraction and tries to hit the hero in the head with a baseball bat. The masked aggressor seems determined to finish the boy off and uses all his strength in that cowardly attack. With a furious glare, the protagonist shows he won't let that aggression slide and prepares for combat. Then all the other delinquents advance and start hitting the young man with various different weapons at the same time. The blows hit the young man's body with great force, but he protects himself to avoid serious injury to his head. Seeing his owner getting beaten, Little Fry barks with all his might, trying to scare the aggressors and protect his friend. The redhead is terrified by the scene and realizes the hero is being punished because of his betrayal and his lie. The henchman with the bat then understands everything and yells that this boy is the heart mutant they were looking for. Red liquid drips from the hero's hand, which is injured after so many blows, and he touches the ground with his fingers. At that moment, his power begins to awaken, and the red liquid on the ground reacts to the touch of his powerful, mutant skin. The aggressor is confused and doesn't understand what's happening as the young man's body begins to regenerate. Suddenly, the protagonist gets up and lands a devastating punch right on the enemy's face, who has no time to react. With incredible speed, he starts to dodge and counterattack all the delinquents with swift and precise blows. In just a few seconds, one of the men is already on the ground, and the others are terrified by the young man's superhuman strength. The henchmen face the protagonist and prepare for combat as the young man slowly approaches. With his head down, he walks toward the danger, and his dark aura makes all the enemies very tense. Furious, the gang leader yells for his men to finish off the intruder once and for all, right there. With that, all the delinquents surround the hero with their bats and prepare for a mass attack. Then the aggressors advance together and start swinging their weapons at the young man. But he dodges everything, and one of the men ends up being thrown by a powerful and accurate kick. In just a few seconds, several henchmen are already on the ground with serious injuries all over their bodies. The young man continues to fight and lands a devastating punch on the face of yet another enemy, who flies far away. Without giving the other a chance to react, he follows up with a kick and finishes the aggressor with a fatal blow. With a cold stare, the protagonist shows he will have no mercy for those who attacked him. At this, one of the masked men tries to hit the young man with a baseball bat, but he's fast. The hero narrowly dodges the attack, and red liquid flies, indicating the blow was a close call. He then uses the enemy's momentum to counterattack and retaliates with an even stronger and more precise blow. The aggressor is thrown with brutal force and crashes into the wall, getting knocked out instantly. The others are terrified and wonder why the new guy is so strong, and if he's even human. At that moment, the young man grabs another enemy by the collar and stares at him with eyes full of hatred. Desperate, the boss pulls out a sharp object and tells the others to do the same to finish off the young man. Then the villain runs and hits the protagonist with a cowardly, cheap shot right in his side. With a cruel smile, the man asks if it hurt and mocks the young man's injury, who feels the impact. The hero coughs a little, and red liquid trickles from his mouth, indicating the attack was much more serious than it seemed. The villain then freaks out and starts striking the hero repeatedly, yelling for the monster to just be gone already. But the young man grabs the blade with his hand, and red liquid drips, indicating the strength of his grip. With that, the gang leader is completely confused and can't understand what's happening. The protagonist stands up and with a cold voice tells the aggressor to stop trying to pierce him like that. He then pulls the object out of his own chest and holds it firmly, leaving his enemy unarmed. Terrified, the man asks what kind of heart he has to withstand such an injury and still be alive. The young man stares at the aggressor and asks if he's curious about his true, powerful mutant nature. Without answering, the hero returns the blow, striking the villain's leg, who screams in pain from the surprise attack. Seeing the scene, the other henchmen panic and realize they shouldn't have messed with a mutant. With that, the young man throws the makeshift weapon to the ground and prepares to finish off the remaining enemies. His eyes glow with an intense red light, and he lunges at the fugitives with absurd speed. He then warns them that now that they know his identity, none of them will escape this place alive. His hateful expression makes it clear that he will have no mercy for those who hurt his new friend. Meanwhile, Little Fry barks happily as if he's cheering for his owner to finish off all the villains. In a few seconds, all the henchmen are on the ground, their faces completely disfigured by the blows. The protagonist stands in the middle of the alley with all the defeated enemies and his puppy by his side. On the ground, the redhead calls his friend's name, still shocked by the display of power he just witnessed. He then asks if the hero is okay and offers to call an ambulance because of the serious injury. But the young man says he's perfectly fine and touches his chest to show there's no longer any wound there. In shock, his friend realizes the hole is gone and is left speechless by the young man's incredible regeneration. With a bleeding nose, the redhead stares at his friend, in total shock at his regeneration power. He then looks away, his expression filled with guilt for betraying the only friend he's ever had. Amidst the defeated enemies, the protagonist apologizes, leaving the delinquent even more confused by everything. Suddenly, the young man clenches his fist tightly and seems to be controlling himself to keep from exploding with anger. On the ground, the young man hits his own head and curses himself for being an idiot and choosing the wrong friends. The hero is surprised and asks if his friend was really trying to sell a friend like that. With his face to the ground, the delinquent asks for forgiveness and confesses that he betrayed him because he was close to those bad guys. He explains that he thought it was cool to hang out with the gang and that deep down he's just a thug like them. But the protagonist approaches and extends a kind of white cloth to the young man, who doesn't understand the gesture. The hero says his nose is bleeding and tells him to use it to clean his face right away. The redhead asks if it's really for him to use, and his friend just confirms with a simple, calm gesture. But upon taking the object, the delinquent realizes it's a puppy training pad and is shocked. Even so, he decides to use it to clean his face and says he doesn't deserve to be treated like a real friend. With a smile, the young man says that means he wasn't the only one who saw them as friends, and that's enough for him. His friend is left speechless by the young man's kindness and stares at him with eyes full of pure admiration. At that moment, tears start to stream down, and the redhead can no longer hold back all the emotion he feels. He then gets up and hugs the protagonist tightly while crying and apologizing for everything he's done. In the midst of the chaos, the young man says that Gio is a really cool guy, and the two finally make peace. On the ground, the gang leader says he's thought about his mistakes and begs to be let go. He then promises he won't tell anyone that the boy is a heart mutant, but his friend gets angry and can't believe what he's hearing from the man. With that, he kicks the leader's face and yells at him to apologize before begging. The redhead screams that the guy is scum and that he's as big as a pig. He keeps hitting the leader while saying he knew from the start he was just faking it. The protagonist just watches as his friend screams for the man to be done for and then asks if they were ever friends. Then his companion asks what they should do with these guys and suggests roughing them up some more. However, the redhead suddenly yells for everyone to wait a second, leaving the hero confused. On the ground, the leader begs them not to call the police and swears he'll never talk about what happened again. Suddenly, they hear a noise and look up to see someone calling for officers nearby. Two police officers show up, saying they're from the local station and that a resident reported a disturbance. The defeated gang members look up in total shock at the arrival of the authorities. The redhead quickly runs towards the officers, saying he was just about to call them. Then he points to the group and says they're scumbags who are in the business of selling people. The boy also claims that if they go to their hideout, they'll find proof for days. He continues, saying they are all over 20 years old and are real criminals, making the leader scream, "No!" Hearing the scream, the redhead looks surprised, and the main character just watches the whole scene. Suddenly, the leader throws himself on the ground and starts screaming for someone to help him. He then says his bones are broken and that he was even poked in the leg, confusing the friend. The man on the ground then points to the protagonist and says he looks like this because he was beaten up by him. Outraged, the redhead yells that this is nonsense and asks who really beat up whom. The hero stands still with his puppy and wonders if they really planned to leave him in pieces. The leader points to the young man and says he's perfectly fine, while they are all injured. Then all the other gang members throw themselves on the ground, faking pain and lying about what happened. One of the police officers asks everyone to calm down and says they can explain the details at the station. But The leader points to the young man and shouts that the most important thing is that he's a heart mutant. The protagonist is shocked to hear this as the man asks if a mutant can just go around hitting people. The guy keeps questioning if there isn't a special law for mutants, and the officers exchange serious looks. Then one of the officers asks if he really is a mutant and asks for his registration card or number. The young man replies that he doesn't have anything like that, which makes the officers suspicious. At that, the officers ask if he's an unregistered mutant, as that is a violation of the law. So they decide to start by registering the young man and ask for his ID and ability. The hero panics because there's no way he can reveal his true identity. He remembers how he barely managed to stop looking like a skeleton to make it harder to track him. The young man thinks that the moment he registers, those guys from the lab will find him. But suddenly, a girl runs towards them, shouting for them to wait a second. The young woman arrives out of breath and greets the officers with a slightly tired smile. Confused, the officers ask who this young woman is who just appeared out of nowhere. Suddenly, one of the officers' cell phones starts ringing, interrupting the conversation. The girl then holds out her own cell phone and asks the officer to take that important call. On the other end of the line, a woman introduces herself as the superintendent of the Special Task Force. Startled, the police officer salutes and identifies himself as a sergeant from the local station. The superintendent explains that the case is an attempted kidnapping and the mutant is a witness. She then takes responsibility and tells him to follow her orders and report to his superiors. The sergeant shouts for the others to only take in the bad guys and let the others go. While being cuffed, the gang leader asks why only they are being taken in if they were the ones who got hurt. He yells furiously and wants to know who was on the phone to make them change their minds. As the gang is led away, the young woman waves with a smile, and the villain wonders who she is. The protagonist then asks the girl what happened and how she knew where to find them. The young woman explains that she saw him at school surrounded by weird guys and decided to follow them. The hero points to his friend and asks if he happened to be one of the suspicious guys. She confirms but wonders why he looks so bad now and what happened to his face. The redhead notices the way the girl is looking at him and remembers that she is the famous Song Hai. The young woman says her sister took care of everything, and the most important thing is to know if her friend is okay. Jealous, the redhead complains that the hero said he didn't have any friends, and now a girl shows up, ignoring his friend. The protagonist turns to the gang leader and asks a question. With a dark look, he asks if his destination happened to be the Hermes lab. The villain denies knowing the lab and says he was going to hand him over to a local broker. He reveals that there are brokers who deal with mutants, and the hero says he wants to meet them. At the police station, the gang leader is sitting while a detective yells about the chaos in the background. The hero's friend is shocked by the idea and says there's no way he can do that. Then the redhead friend agrees and warns that it's too dangerous and he has no idea of the risk. The young woman explains that her sister warned her that they target mutants and are very dangerous people. But with crumbs on his face, the protagonist smiles and says that now he wants to meet them even more. Not understanding, the girl asks why he's so desperate to meet a broker. At that, the young man touches his face and says he was wondering about something very important. He reveals that he might be able to find his lost friends through those people. Outraged, his friend yells that he had said he didn't have any friends and calls him a dummy. The hero explains that they aren't friends from the outside, but from inside the lab where he used to live. In a memory, he recounts that life in the lab was full of pain and experiments. One day, he was dragged to an unknown place, and since he had never traveled before, he was terrified. As he was being taken, he wondered how painful the next cruel experiment would be. Suddenly, the place they took him to was filled with sharp and very deadly knives. The little boy is in shock when he sees that the blades were flying around the room on their own. He thinks he's going to be pierced over and over again and becomes terrified of the situation. The men behind him were also scary, and if he didn't go in, It could be much worse. With that, the door opens, and the young skeleton enters the bright and very dangerous room. Inside, other mutants were using their powers against each other in a life or death battle. The little skeleton watches the whole scene with wide eyes, not understanding anything. Then one of the boys stops one of the flying blades, using only his fingers. Next, he prepares to attack another young man with the knife in a direct hit. But the attack hits the target, who seems to feel nothing as it all happens right there. At that, the target's body becomes completely encased in ice, and the skeleton gets scared. The attacker looks down with an expression of pure determination on his face now. The skeleton watches the girl and the other boy who were fighting bravely there. Then the young woman yells at the other boy, calling him a psycho for attacking a classmate. The boy points to the skeleton and explains that he is also an experiment, just like them. With that, the little mutant becomes totally confused about what is happening in the room. Suddenly, all the other young people turn and stare at the newly arrived skeleton. Terrified, the little skeleton hides his face with his arms and asks them not to look at him. But the other young mutants stare at him with curiosity, without any fear or disgust. One of the boys says he looks normal, and that he's only a skeleton because he's a mutant. The skeleton is surprised, and another young person asks if he's okay, and if it's his first time there. At that, they all start to introduce themselves, and the boy who attacked him apologizes for calling him that. Then they ask what his name is, and he reflects that this is how he met his friends. While eating, the hero explains that the place gathered children from various labs for study, and because they were all test subjects and mutants, they ended up becoming friends very quickly. The young man becomes thoughtful and says that, because they had few classes per year, they didn't see each other often. His new friends get emotional and cry thinking about how difficult his life was. The girl then asks where his friends from the lab are now that he is free. He tells them that on the day they escaped together, they ended up getting separated because of the chase. Hearing this, the young woman understands that he wants to find the brokers because his friends might have been caught. Moved, the two say they will help the protagonist find his old friends again. The redhead friend grabs the gang leader's cell phone and says the broker's contact is in there. Looking at the screen, the hero gets scared and asks if number 7 isn't too far away. The scene changes to a warehouse where a man is screaming in pain while luxury cars are parked. Inside, several armed men run to attack a single, mysterious hooded figure, but the mysterious young man dodges the attacks and fights against the men with great skill. One of the attackers criticizes him and says that if you swing a knife that way, it won't work. He shows how the blade won't cut properly if held that incorrect way. Next, the hooded young man attacks all the men with impressive speed. In a few seconds, all the attackers are down on the ground, completely defeated by him. A man then pulls out a weapon and warns that knives don't work against that guy. He points the weapon and prepares to fire at the mysterious young man without any mercy. The hooded figure just calmly watches the man preparing to shoot. Then the young man reveals himself to be Che-1, a friend from the lab, and says his blade can even cut steel. We then see his mutant heart, which is made of several sharp, metallic blades. Suddenly, one of the men who is still standing makes a desperate run for it, trying to escape, but Che-1 throws his blade and hits the runner right in the head, knocking him to the ground. The blade returns to the hero's friend, who ends up falling to the ground from the impact. Sitting among the fallen enemies, he holds out his hand and tells them to do better next time. The scene changes, and we see the cover of the next chapter with a mysterious figure with a hood and claws. Meanwhile, the protagonist arrives in an alley and confirms that this is the meeting spot. He looks around and notices that the place is indeed very isolated and perfect for an ambush. With that, the young man prepares himself, as this is the meeting point with the mutant broker. Looking at his phone, he realizes there are still 30 minutes until the target finally arrives. He then thinks about the broker who traffics mutants and remembers that he might be one too. In a flashback, his friend asks if he's really going to meet that dangerous man. She warns him that they are criminals who hunt mutants, and some are mutants themselves. But the young man explains that's precisely why he has to go, as they might know about his friends. Although worried, his friend listens to his plan to just watch from a distance and shout if anything goes wrong. Back in the present, the young man crouches down, thinking about what he told the girl to calm her down. However, he decides that if things get ugly, he will simply capture the broker. For that, he looks for something he can use for an ambush and finds a wrench. He thinks that if the enemy is a mutant, he can't attack blindly and needs to figure out his ability. Suddenly, several knives fly toward him, and he narrowly dodges the surprise attack. The young man falls to the ground, screaming in fright as the blades embed themselves in a metal pipe. He looks at the knives and is in shock, as he wasn't expecting an attack like that. Then a hooded figure appears and asks what kind of rat he is to be hiding like that. The person approaches and asks if the young man happens to be an undercover cop. Nervously, the protagonist wonders if this man is the broker he was looking for. He notices that the man uses a knife and thinks that he might just be a regular human after all. With that, the young man decides that if he is human, it will be much easier to capture him. He then leans on a concrete block and prepares to attack with all his strength. In the blink of an eye, the young man dashes forward with absurd speed towards the enemy. He prepares a powerful punch, aiming right for the face of the hooded man in front of him. His plan is to not give the guy time to react and to end the fight quickly. But suddenly, his eyes widen as he realizes something completely unexpected. The man pulls back his hood, revealing himself to be Che-1, his friend from the lab, leaving the hero in shock. The protagonist is confused and wonders how his old friend knows his real name. But with no time to think, his friend attacks him with his blade and throws him far away with the blow. With that, the young man falls hard to the ground, while his former friend looks down on him with the weapon. In great pain, he tries to get up but feels that something is very wrong with his body now. He then realizes his strength is gone, because the enemy's attack cut the tendons in his leg. The attacker also injured his wrist and shoulder, leaving him completely immobilized on the alley floor. His feet were also hit by the attack, and now he can't even move. He then remembers that his friend's swordsmanship skill is far above normal. In a memory, the skeleton was guiding all his friends to the exit during the lab escape. Suddenly, a wall collapses and blocks the path of all the escapees in the hallway. With that, the young skeleton is trapped behind, unable to get past the large debris. He becomes desperate because he is now separated from all his friends on the other side of the wall. Seeing the scene, his friend uses his blade to cut through the debris and open a path for him. The skeleton watches his friend's brave act and is very grateful for his help. With a determined smile, the young man says he will clear the way for everyone to escape. Back in the present, the young man asks how he knew his name and confirms that he is Che-1. However, his old friend seems confused and doesn't understand what is happening there. He wonders how the young man is standing and if he happens to be a heart mutant too. Then the hero shouts that he is Kim Jae-oh, the skeleton who was his friend in the lab before. The other young man still seems suspicious and repeats the word skeleton without much belief. He points at the young man and tries to remember the Kim Jae-oh he knew in the lab. With a smile, the hero says that he's alive and that it's been a long time since they've seen each other. Che-1 stammers and asks if he is really the Kim Jae-oh he knew in the past. The young man confirms and explains that he managed to regenerate and that he was finally recognized. Happy, the young man runs to hug his friend, but the other transforms his hand into sharp claws. Without hesitation, he attacks the hero head on with his claws, leaving the protagonist shocked. The young man stumbles backward as his former friend prepares to attack again. With his body injured, he asks why his friend didn't recognize him and attacked him like that. Che-1 observes the wound's healing and says that now he believes he is Kim Jae-oh. The protagonist shows the knives in his body and still doesn't understand his friend's attitude. The protagonist's friend continues to attack mercilessly with his sharp and deadly blade. The hero dodges the blows, but the enemy's speed is impressive and hard to keep up with. He manages to narrowly dodge and falls to the ground as his former friend continues the attack. On the ground, the young man asks why he is being attacked in such a cruel and unfair way. The other young man replies that he should know the answer better than anyone else there. With that, the protagonist tries to fight back with a punch, but the opponent's speed is much greater. He is hit several times and realizes that his friend is too fast for him to fight. We see his injured arm and the red liquid dripping onto the floor of the dark, dirty alley. The attacker leaps for another attack, and the hero prepares to defend himself as best he can. But instead of dodging, he catches the blade with his bare hands, surprising the enemy. The young man is in shock, because he didn't expect him to be able to hold his weapon like that. The former friend asks if he really thinks a punch would work against a blade. The protagonist states that he knows how good he is with a sword and faces him with determination. One is surprised by the young man's confidence and doesn't understand what his plan is. Then the hero grips the blade tighter and stares at him with his eyes full of hatred. The young man tries to pull his weapon back, but the other holds it with superhuman strength. Without letting go of the blade, he uses the momentum to get closer and kicks the enemy in the face. The attacker is completely shocked by the strength and fighting skill of his former friend. With a powerful kick, the protagonist sends his friend flying, who falls hard onto the alley floor. Sitting up, the young man says he thought he was weak, but now with flesh on his bones, he's not so bad. He then asks why the hero ran away, if he can fight so well like that. The young man is confused and doesn't understand what his friend means by that accusation. With a serious look, one says that he ran away on the day they escaped from the lab. In a flashback, we see the lab guards capturing one of the young mutants. The others hide terrified behind debris as the situation becomes dangerous. Desperate, the friend asks the skeleton to grab an iron pipe so they can fight. The little skeleton stands still, looking at the pipe, not knowing what to do at that moment. With a hateful look, the friend says that, at the moment they were surrounded and in peril, he claims that the protagonist ran away alone and abandoned all his friends. The hero is shocked by the accusation and tries to remember what happened that day. The hero defends himself from his friend's attack, but can't strike back in time to hit him. With a swift blow, the attacker throws the protagonist, who dodges at the last second. The young man falls to the ground once more, and the other faces him with his blade in hand, ready for more. On the ground, he asks why he's being attacked and what he did to deserve this. With a cold look, the former friend says he knows the answer better than anyone. The protagonist tries to attack again, but the enemy's speed is far superior to his. He is hit by several cuts and can't even get close enough to fight back. All wounded, the young man observes the blood on the floor and on his body as the pain increases. His friend then leaps for a final attack, and he braces himself for the worst to come. But instead of being hit, the hero realizes the blow landed somewhere else and is surprised. The attack was actually a distraction, and the real blow came from another direction. A large explosion occurs, destroying everything around and scaring people passing by. The hero's friends are terrified by the noise and think about calling the police. They wonder what happened and if they should go check on the situation first. Amidst the dust, the attacker comments that his friend's regeneration is much faster. With that, the protagonist says there seems to be a misunderstanding, as he never really ran away. He explains that he stayed behind to protect everyone and came to rescue his friends. The other young man seems skeptical and asks if he's saying it was all just a mistake. But before answering, the hero hears noises and realizes there are more people nearby. He says there are people here, and his friend remains silent for a moment, looking at him. With a touch, the protagonist absorbs the energy from one of the men, leaving him unconscious. One says they made a lot of noise and invites him to his hideout to talk. He explains that a lot has happened since the escape, and that he has a lot to tell him. The hero looks at him and realizes his friend's personality is completely different. He remembers how his friend used to be more cheerful and smiley back in the lab. Now in his hideout, he wonders what on earth happened to his old friend. The scene then shifts to a convenience store where the redhead friend is working. The protagonist then suddenly wakes up and realizes he was dreaming about all of it. He looks around and sees the ingredients for a sandwich flying towards him. The young man is confused because he doesn't understand how he got there or what's happening. Several clones of the hero's friend appear and start preparing burgers in the kitchen. The protagonist and other customers look on in shock at the scene and wonder what is happening. They are impressed by the young man's ability to make 3 burgers at the same time. We then see the sandwich being assembled with several fresh and delicious ingredients flying around. All the clones then come together to finish the burger with perfect teamwork. With a smile, he hands over the order and tells them to really enjoy the new house burger. Outside, the hero realizes that his friend's hideout is actually a diner. At the end of the episode, we see the young man cleaning his teeth in the restroom mirror of the place. Now seated, his friend says that this is his workplace, leaving the protagonist shocked. The young man can't believe his friend has a job, and his friend calls him unemployed for it. But before answering, the hero notices his other friends hiding behind the sofa, watching him. He introduces them to his lab friend, saying one is a friend, and the other helped him a lot. The old friend seems surprised and comments that it must be nice to make friends, even when you're unemployed. The girl gets annoyed and says he knows nothing about the difficult life the hero has had. The protagonist then calms everyone down and asks his friends to stay close by in case they are needed. Sitting at the table, he faces his friend, who asks if he really didn't run away that day. The young man explains that there was a hidden bomb on the escape route they were using. He says that the moment they were surrounded by the lab guards, something happened. With his skeleton body, he could clearly hear the sound of a time bomb. The other young people were terrified and didn't notice the danger that was coming. Having been part of experiments with explosions, he recognized the sound of a burning fuse. He realized the lab planned to blow up the building to trap everyone in the rubble. He knew that the stronger ones might survive, but the weaker ones would perish in the explosion. So he grabbed as many bombs as he could and ran far away to save everyone. With the bombs in his arms, the little skeleton ran desperately away from the group. He says he might have been thrown far by the explosion because he woke up in a forest. As soon as he recovered, he ran back but found no one and believed they had escaped. His friend then remembers hearing a distant explosion and becomes thoughtful. He asks if the hero is really saying that he grabbed the bomb and ran away with it. With his hand on his face, the friend seems unable to believe the story and refuses to accept the truth. The hero says he knows it's hard to believe, but his friend surprises him by saying he believes it. With tears in his eyes, the young man says he couldn't explain about the bombs at the time. The protagonist is surprised and doesn't understand his friend's sudden change of attitude. The scene returns to the diner where the friend is using his clones to prepare the burgers. The ingredients fly around the kitchen as he works with incredible speed. The onions are masterfully chopped, and the buns are prepared to receive the fillings. He then hands the burger to his friend and says he figured something like that had happened. With a tray full of food, the young man says he heard he went through a lot. Happy, the hero thanks him and starts to devour the meal while other girls approach. They ask to take a picture with the manager, and he accepts with a smile on his face. With his arms crossed, the young man apologizes to his friend for attacking him earlier. He says he tried to attack him without even hearing his side and regrets it with tears. But the protagonist says it's okay and compliments the food, saying he's jealous of him. The friend says if it's not enough, he can eat more since he's the manager of the shop. He points to his name tag with pride, and the hero is impressed with his position there. The young man says it's very cool, and that he seems like a normal person working like that. Then his friend offers to get him a job there too, making the young man excited. He even promises a higher salary, and the other friends find him a bit strange for it. But suddenly, the hero raises his hand and interrupts the conversation with a serious expression. He points at his friend and asks why he was working as a broker before. With a furious look, the friend calls him a scumbag and seems ready for a fight. but the protagonist says that if he's a broker, then it's all just an act. His friend scratches his head and explains that he only pretends to be a broker from time to time. He reveals that when he's not working, he poses as a broker to lure in the bad guys. His plan is to attract the mutant kidnappers and take them down to protect others. Surprised, the hero asks if it's true, and his friend confirms it's all a disguise. Relieved, the protagonist says he was worried he had become a broker. He asks if his friend works at the diner and secretly pretends to be a broker on the side. With a smile, the young man gives a thumbs up and says what he does is incredible. The friend gets embarrassed by the compliment, but seems happy to have reconciled with him. The hero's friend offers to help, and the young man is confused by his proposal. He explains that they reunited to get news of their friends, and that he can help with that. Chae-won seems surprised, but the protagonist says that, of course, he needs help. With a smile, the old friend slaps the table and says he accepts the partnership between them. He reveals that he has a broker to take down, and with his friend's ability, it will be easy. The hero gets excited and says that if they catch the right guys, they might find out about the others. His friend extends his fist and says he will be a great help on this dangerous mission. They then do a fist bump, and the young man promises he will look for him if he needs backup. With the plan set, he says the shop is busy, and he needs to get back to work now. Outside, the protagonist thanks his friends for waiting and for the chance to talk. The redhead friend says he's glad his friend isn't a weird guy after all. He still seems suspicious and asks if he's sure that he's really his friend. The girl agrees and says she was shocked to learn he was a people broker, but the hero smiles and says it's okay because he's exactly like he was as a kid. She then asks how his friend will contact him if he doesn't even have a cell phone. The young man pulls a cell phone from his pocket and says he does have one, confusing his friends. The scene changes to a young man running desperately through a dark and very dangerous alley. 3 men chase him and shout for him not to run away and to enter the dead-end alley. With nowhere to go, the young man is cornered by the attackers who slowly approach. He screams for them to stop following him, and a yellow substance begins to come out of his hands. The liquid spreads across the ground, and the pursuers realize it's a mutant ability. They warn that it's oil, and that they need to be careful with that boy's special power. Relieved, the young man realizes he managed to escape and celebrates still being alive. But suddenly, a powerful punch hits him right in the face and throws him hard to the ground. A man in a suit appears and asks where he thinks he's going like that. Terrified, the young man begs not to be taken out and says his heart is nothing special. But the man grabs him by the hair and mocks his pathetic oil spitting ability. Another man says that not every mutant is strong and that the losers are like normal people. The group's leader smiles and says this makes their job easier, and the money too. He reveals they are being paid 1 billion for that boy, and the young man screams in pure despair. Suddenly, Chae-won appears and asks if that's all they're being paid for that mutant. The men are confused and wonder who this guy is who appeared out of nowhere. Before they can react, the young man attacks the leader and takes him down with a quick, precise blow. With his blade, he warns that they should charge more for risking their lives like this. One of the thugs yells that he's a mutant, and they all advance to attack him with their knives. The young man counts that there are about 10 men, and that he needs to finish this quickly. In the blink of an eye, he defeats all the enemies with impressive speed. His skill with the blade is incredible, and he moves like a blur among the opponents. One of the men then pulls out a weapon and shouts for the others to do the same to stop him. With the weapon in hand, the thug prepares to shoot, but the young man doesn't seem intimidated. He approaches and says that their weapons are also made of steel and smiles coldly. With his blade power, he activates his mutant heart and prepares for the attack. In an instant, he grabs the man's weapon with his hand and completely transforms it. The barrel of the weapon is totally altered by the young man's ability, which he masters with his power. The thug is in shock and doesn't understand what's happening to his firearm. Suddenly, several sharp blades emerge from within the weapon and pierce the man's hand. He screams in pain as the blood flows and the blades continue to grow endlessly. The young man then uses the transformed weapon to attack the thug, who is unable to defend himself. With everyone defeated, he warns them not to mess with metals next time. The rescued mutant thanks him for being saved and calls him a hero in that moment. He asks if the young man is also a mutant and smiles, relieved to have been saved. But one tells him to shut up, and the young man is confused by his savior's coldness. On a call, he reports that he has recovered the mutant who had been taken by the bad guys. The person on the other end of the line tells him to take the young man straight to the lab. The young man is terrified to hear the word collab and doesn't understand the situation. Impatiently, one says he's noisy and that he's the broker who is going to sell him. The scene then changes, and we see a woman saying he's on a different level from the others. She says he never fails a job, and that's why he's so reliable to them. In his hideout, the young man makes another call and says he has one more thing to report. With a serious look, he informs them that he has finally found the whereabouts of Kim Ji-io. On the phone, the woman is surprised to hear the protagonist's name on the call. The hero's friend says she promised a reward if he captured him for her. With a wicked smile, the woman confirms that the offer is still on the table for him. He then says he will deliver the young man the next day and hangs up the call. His friend thinks that his friend's regeneration is very strong and that normal methods won't work. While cleaning the diner, he decides he needs to find a place with a lot of metal. Elsewhere, the young man prepares a curry stew that looks very delicious. A girl in a wheelchair praises the dish and says he is the best cook. With a smile, he says he put in a lot of potatoes because he knows it's her favorite. The young woman is happy and says she loved the dish and that everything is delicious as always. He gently pats her head and promises he will make anything she wants to eat. The girl invites him to eat with them, but he seems busy with other things. He says he can't today because he needs to go somewhere important and gets ready to leave. The girl looks sad and asks if he's going out again, which makes the young man's heart ache. He promises he'll be back to finish eating and asks her to save some for him. The scene then changes to an apartment building at night, with a starry sky in the background. The protagonist's friend is in the kitchen, preparing something special for her friend. She thinks he ran around all day with the puppy and must be exhausted from everything. With that, she decides that meat and fruit are good for recovering from fatigue and restoring energy. She looks at the ingredients with a determined gaze and prepares to cook. The result is a dish of ribs with tangerines and strawberries, a very exotic combination. With her phone in hand, she says that ChatGPT assured her the combination would be good. She reads the recipe and is surprised to have found something so different and unusual. Excited, the young woman tosses the pan in the air and wonders if she has a talent for cooking. Suddenly, a message from her sister arrives on her phone with a question about the food. She tells her sister about the strange dish, and the other reacts with a disgusted sticker. The girl gets annoyed with the reaction and decides to save some for her sister to try. She then tells her friend that her sister won't be home until early morning and that he can go to bed early. But the young man says he's fine and that he's waiting for his friend to call any moment. With a smile, the young woman asks if meeting his friend today was that good for him. With the puppy in his lap, the hero smiles and says he missed his friend a lot. The girl comments that she's never seen him so relaxed before, and he agrees with a smile. He says one is a very precious friend to him and remembers the past. In a memory, his friend finds him alone and asks what he's doing there. The little skeleton gets scared and doesn't know what to say to his friend all of a sudden. He shrinks in his chair and says he was just sitting alone, doing nothing, but his friend notices that one of his arms is missing, and the skeleton yells not to touch it. He explains that the wound from an experiment hasn't healed yet and asks him not to look. With a smile, the young man asks if that's why he's pouting and calls him over. He asks for the skeleton's arm, who is confused but obeys without questioning his friend. Suddenly, the little mutant sees himself in the mirror, and his arm has been transformed into a blade. He is in shock at his new appearance and can't believe what he's seeing. His friend asks if it looks cool, and the skeleton is still trying to understand the transformation. A friend of theirs appears and asks if Che-1 was bothering the skeleton again, but he denies it and says he just made him cooler, with a sharp sword arm. With a blushing face, the little mutant says he thought the transformation was very cool. The girl is completely confused by the reaction and doesn't understand what's happening. His friend then does a fist bump with the skeleton to celebrate their new friendship. He explains that it's a gesture to prove trust, and the skeleton is amazed. They do the fist bump, and the little mutant feels that they are now real friends. Back in the present, the hero says his friend was very cool and that he followed him everywhere. The girl is shocked and wonders why anyone would want to have a sword for an arm, but she is happy to see her friend, so pleased to have found an old friend again. She calls him to eat, and he says he's fine on his own because he didn't do anything to help. With a smile, she shows him the plate of ribs with fruit and invites him to dinner. The young man is impressed by the appearance of the dish and wonders what it is. She says it's a special dish of ribs with strawberries and tangerines for him. He's never seen anything like it and is curious to try that exotic combination. With his chopsticks, he picks up a piece of meat and a strawberry and prepares to eat. He thanks her for the food and tries the dish with an expression of pure curiosity. He chews the food, and his friend eagerly asks if the dish is good. With tears in his eyes, the young man says it's absolutely incredible and praises the flavor. He says the strawberries, the meat, and the tangerines are all delicious together. The puppy comes closer, and the young man asks if he can give some to him too. But the girl says it's dangerous, and that you can't give just any food to an animal. She approaches the little one and promises she'll make something so special just for him later. The protagonist says thank you, and that this is the best food he has ever eaten in his life. Happy, the young woman promises she will cook something delicious for him again soon. He thanks her once more and continues to eat with his cheeks full and a smile. Suddenly, his cell phone rings, and he realizes it's a call from his friend Che-1. The young man answers the phone, but on the other end of the line, he hears a desperate cry for help. He asks what's wrong, and his friend says things have gotten dangerous with the guys from the lab. The young man is in shock, and the girl gets scared when she hears the word "clab" in the conversation. Desperate, his friend asks if he can come help him now, and the hero agrees right away. Before hanging up, his friend says the location is the last building in an abandoned factory lot. With the call ended, the protagonist gets ready to go help his friend in danger. He swallows his food and tells his friend that his buddy is in trouble and needs help. The young man apologizes for not being able to finish the food and thanks her for the delicious dinner. He then runs to the door, and his friend says she's going with him, but he stops her right away. The scene changes to a large abandoned warehouse full of metal structures and boxes. The hero arrives at the location and hides to observe the environment with great caution. He wonders why it's so quiet, if this is the place his friend indicated. Suddenly, the young man notices something strange and begins to analyze the place more closely. He touches a container and notes that the floor and walls are all made of metal. Steel pipes, plates, and bolts are everywhere, and the floor is covered with metal sheets. The young man is confused because this is a place where his friend would have a total advantage in a fight. He doesn't understand how his friend could have been defeated in a place like this. With a suspicious look, he starts walking through the warehouse in search of answers. The scene focuses on a pool of blood on the floor, indicating that something terrible happened there. The hero approaches and finds a mask on the ground, preparing for the worst. He decides he needs to keep his guard up because he can't be defeated here too. The young man imagines his friend might be tied up and trembling with fear somewhere. Suddenly, he hears a noise and turns to see what's happening in the warehouse. Several blades emerge from the floor and attack him by surprise with incredible speed. The blades pierce his body, and he screams in pain from the unexpected and brutal attack. He turns and sees his friend standing there with a cold, expressionless look. The blades continue to pierce his body, and he falls to the ground, gravely injured. He wonders what that sword is, and how his friend could be doing this. With a wicked smile, his friend thanks him for coming and glares at him with hatred. The hero is confused and asks what he is doing, and why he wasn't captured. The attacker says he can see with his own eyes that he's perfectly fine. With a hateful look, he reveals that the protagonist was tricked from the very beginning. He then moves into attack, and the young man tries to defend himself, but the pain is too great. The young man removes the blades from his body and prepares to fight against his traitorous friend. The two face each other, and the hero dodges a blow and tries to counter with a well-aimed kick. He hits the enemy's face with a powerful kick, but the pain prevents him from continuing. His friend throws him far away and prepares for the next attack with his blade in hand. The protagonist is breathless and realizes his body is too injured to fight. He prepares for another blow, and his former friend watches him with a cold stare. With the blade in his hand, he says he's happy to have seen him today after so long. He says it was strange because he only ever saw him as a skeleton, and now he's human. His friend continues, saying that just from hearing him speak, he knew he was the same as before. But he reveals that he lied to his friend, because now he captures mutants for the lab. With a look of pure evil, he confesses that he came to send him back to that place. On the ground, the hero feels the blood flowing and looks at his friend with a mix of hatred and pain. His friend sits on a pipe and asks if his friend is underestimating him at that moment. Then he stands up and says it's a shame. They are no longer allies now. With the blade in his hand, he prepares for the final attack, and the protagonist faces him. The scene ends with the two staring each other down, ready for a deadly battle between friends. At the beginning of the chapter, the former friend confirms he is a broker and is there for a reason. He reveals that he is there to drag the protagonist back to the lab he escaped from. The hero is in shock at the revelation and can't believe what he's hearing. With his hand on a metal beam, the attacker uses his ability and transforms it into blades. Suddenly, one of the blades flies towards the young man, who narrowly dodges the attack. He uses his speed to dodge, but his friend continues to chase him with his weapon. The protagonist jumps back and prepares for the next move from the traitorous enemy. With a powerful kick, he tries to hit his friend, but the other dodges with ease. The hero realizes that his friend is not trying to restrain him, but to finish him off for good. With a hateful look, the young man understands that his former friend's intention is to get rid of him there. He grabs a metal plate and uses it as a shield to protect himself from the enemy's attacks. The attacker strikes him with his blade, and the protagonist wonders if he's really going to turn him in. He shouts for his friend to wake up and says he doesn't know what's happening to him. But his friend glares at him coldly and says there's no need to talk anymore. He just tells the hero to let himself be captured and continues with his attacks. The blade pierces through the metal plate, and the young man is thrown backward by the force of the blow. On the ground, he grits his teeth in pain and hatred for being betrayed in such a way. He yells at his friend and asks if he's gone crazy and if he's still in contact with the lab. With the metal plate in his hands, he gets up and shouts for his friend to snap out of that trance. He calls him an idiot and prepares to fight back with all his strength at that moment. With a furious look, his friend prepares for another attack with his sharp blades. He leaps and attacks the hero with incredible speed, cutting through everything in his path. The protagonist narrowly dodges and realizes he can't get close to the enemy. He tries to find an opening in his friend's defense, but his speed is impressive. With a wicked smile, the attacker says that running is useless and prepares for the final blow. He uses his ability, and several blades emerge from the metal floor to trap the hero. One of the blades pierces the young man's neck, leaving him trapped and unable to move. With a look of despair, he realizes that his friend planned everything from the beginning. The scene focuses on the protagonist's face, who is now cornered and in serious danger. His friend looks at him with a victorious gaze and says he won't escape that trap. The protagonist thinks that his former friend is really going to sell him to the lab. Desperate, the young man screams and asks why he is doing this, and if he doesn't care about his suffering. But his former friend coldly replies that he doesn't care and prepares to attack. With a furious look, the hero decides that if this is how it's going to be, then he will fight. At that, he tries to land a kick, but the attacker dodges the blow with great agility. With that, the young man is hit by the enemy's blade, and blood trickles from his mouth. However, the traitor is shocked to see that his attack was stopped by his opponent's hand. Without hesitation, the young man lands a powerful punch right on his former companion's chin. The attacker is completely confused and wonders what just happened there. Down on the ground, he thinks that the blow didn't even hurt and watches the hero prepare for more. With a smile, he reflects that years of torment have given him a high tolerance for pain. He remembers that his skeleton friend's regeneration is on a completely different level. The traitor thinks that his target heals as soon as he's cut and manages to fight back in the same second. So the former friend decides that in that case, he will attack relentlessly to give him no chance to react. He advances and starts cutting the hero multiple times to shred him before he can fight back. His plan is to ensure the young man can't attack while he is regenerating. With a determined look, the attacker continues his rapid and brutal attacks. The protagonist grits his teeth in pain as his body is covered in wounds. The scene shifts to a memory of the hero as a skeleton chained up in a room. Suddenly, the chains holding him are released, and he is free to move. A voice announces the start of the regeneration experiment, and the skeleton braces for the worst. At that moment, a young Che-1 is thrown into the room and calls out the skeleton friend's name. Surprised, the little skeleton recognizes his friend and also calls him by his name. A scientist explains that the experiment will observe the regeneration process of a mutant. With that, he orders Che-1 to use his ability to attack the other mutant in the room. Shocked, the boy wonders if the scientist has gone crazy for giving such an order. He then yells that he won't do it and says he's leaving that horrible place. But suddenly, a collar on his neck electrocutes him as punishment for his disobedience. Seeing his friend suffer, the skeleton yells for him not to hesitate and just do as he was told. The young mutant then calls him an idiot and asks how he could hurt a friend. The little skeleton shouts at his friend and says the attack won't even really hurt. But his friend says he'd rather perish and refuses to hurt his companion that way. At that, the protagonist calls him weak and tells him to stop acting tough and obey. The young mutant is completely shocked and confused by his skeleton friend's words. Then, the skeleton explains that his power is weak compared to what he has already suffered. The young man is in shock and repeats the word, weak, unable to believe what he just heard. The protagonist confirms and tells him not to waste time because he regenerates quickly. With a furious look, his friend summons his blade and says he will show him just how weak he is. The two glare at each other with hatred, and the little skeleton realizes he has really angered his friend. Without hesitation, his friend attacks the skeleton with a precise and very powerful blow. The protagonist wonders if perhaps he went too far and angered his friend too much. Angrily, the young man attacks him several times and asks if he's feeling pain now. Even while being cut, the skeleton shouts that he feels no pain, and his friend continues the attack. He keeps attacking his friend relentlessly with his sharp and hate-filled blade. Lying on the floor in a pool of blood, the experiment is finally declared complete. Panting, the young man stares at his fallen friend, his body covered in blood. On the floor, the skeleton screams that it hurts a lot and that he's in a lot of pain now. But suddenly, he realizes it doesn't hurt as much as he imagined and is confused. At that, his friend tells him not to move and to pretend, as the scientists won't notice. The skeleton is shocked and asks what he did and if he cut himself too. His friend confirms and tells him to be quiet before the researchers figure out the plan. The protagonist asks why he did that if he would have healed anyway. With that, his friend calls him an idiot and says he knows his recovery is slow. He also reveals that he knows the lab doesn't give him blood out of fear of his regeneration. The skeleton is speechless upon hearing that and realizes his friend's sacrifice. The young man tells him not to look at him like a martyr, as that's embarrassing between friends. Back in the present, The hero remembers this and asks why he is acting this way now. With a firm step, the traitor advances towards the protagonist without any hesitation. He prepares to attack his former friend with a powerful and rage-filled punch. The two face each other once more, ready to continue the deadly fight in that warehouse. The former friend is surprised because the protagonist managed to stop his punch at the last second. With his face full of anger, the hero grits his teeth, unable to believe the betrayal he has suffered. The traitor wonders how he can still face him like that after being so badly injured. With a smile, the young man prepares to counter his former companion's attack. With that, he lands a blow that sends the enemy flying and yells that this really irritates him. Placing his hand on the floor, the hero tries to get up to continue fighting his friend. Then he yells that he's not going to fight and tells his former friend to leave that place. But the attacker calls him a joke for still resisting even after all the injuries. He tells the young man to give up because one way or another, he's going to turn him over to the lab. The traitor then mentions the protagonist's new friends and threatens him with a cold stare. With a smile, he asks if he should go after those two young students first. Hearing the threat, the young man blocks the blade with his own arm, suffering a major injury. A pool of blood forms on the warehouse floor as the fight becomes more serious. Even injured, the hero holds onto his former friend and won't let him get away. With a smile, the traitor says he's finally facing him and asks if his friends are important. He continues the taunt and says that finding two normal students would be very easy. Then he threatens that if the protagonist runs, his friends will pay the price for it. Furious, the hero grabs the traitor's face to make him shut his mouth once and for all. The scene focuses on the young man's hand, covering his former friend's mouth, who is shocked. With a deadly look, the protagonist warns the traitor not to cross the line with him. He yells that Haiji and Tegu are his friends too, and that he won't let anything happen to them. The young man says he wanted to hear his friends' reasons, because they were friends in the past. We then see his mutant heart glowing with immense and rage-filled power. With hatred, he says he no longer cares about the reasons, and that he will finish the traitor now. The traitor gets angry and realizes the protagonist is absorbing his blood through his mouth. The veins in the young man's arm glow as he continues to drain the enemy's energy. We see the blood being absorbed and transformed into power within the hero's body. With that, his arm that had been injured begins to completely regenerate. In a few seconds, the limb is as good as new, and he prepares to attack. The former friend is in shock to see that his opponent's arm healed so quickly. With his recovered arm, the hero lands a powerful punch to the traitor's face. The young man is thrown far away by the force of the blow and crashes onto the warehouse floor. He coughs in great pain and realizes the attack was much stronger than expected. The traitor notes that he has 3 broken ribs and that his iron body didn't protect him. He then realizes that if he gets hit like that again, the blow could be fatal. But with no time to react, the protagonist lands another punch with all his might. With that, the attacker is knocked to the ground once more, completely defeated by the hero. Lying among the debris, he thinks that his opponent is too fast for him to keep up. The young man can't even react, and the hero approaches for the final blow. In the blink of an eye, the young man lands another powerful punch to the enemy's face. The traitor is sent flying and seems to have no more chances of winning the fight. On the ground, he wonders where on earth all that strength from his former friend is coming from. The attacker then reflects on whether the young man got so strong just by absorbing a little blood. To buy time, he decides to use his power to create several blades on the warehouse floor. But the hero dodges all the blades with impressive speed and agility. The traitor is shocked and wonders if the young man is predicting where the blades will appear. Then he realizes that the hero is seeing the blades and dodging them with his own eyes. The young man wonders how his reaction speed is so insane and where this power comes from. He then realizes that his friend's ability is not just regeneration as he had thought. The traitor understands that compared to when he was a skeleton, his strength and reflexes are on another level. With a look of despair, he realizes that if this continues, he will end up losing the fight. So, surrounded by debris, the young man says he didn't want to have to use that special power. With that, he absorbs all the iron particles in the area, even though it hurts him greatly. In return, his sword heart reacts violently and transforms for the final battle. With his power at its maximum, the traitor's HUD transforms into spikes, and he prepares to attack. Hundreds of sharp blades explode from his body in every possible direction. He yells at the protagonist and says that no matter how much he regenerates, he will never get past. The hero faces the scene, but doesn't seem the least bit intimidated by the enemy's new form. With a look of contempt, he asks, "So what?" and prepares to attack anyway. The young man shouts that it doesn't matter how many blades the traitor has and charges forward without fear. Then he lands a powerful punch that breaks through his former friend's defensive spikes. With that, the attacker spits up blood and is completely in shock at the force of the blow. The hero says that this kind of thing doesn't hurt at all and that he can take it. His mutant heart glows, and he explains that he can endure having his flesh torn by blades. The scene focuses on his eye, and he reveals what really hurts him. With that, he attacks the enemy with a series of powerful and very fast punches. The traitor is thrown against a glass wall, which shatters from the impact of the blow. We see the two reflected in the glass shards as the attacker continues to take a beating. The protagonist shouts that being betrayed by a friend is what hurts his heart the most. With a final punch, he hits his former friend's face, who can no longer defend himself. Then the young man explains that this is the greatest pain of all and throws the traitor to the ground. The attacker falls in the middle of the warehouse, creating a shockwave from the force of the impact. Standing, the hero says that betrayal hurts much more than any of his blades. He reveals that a friend of 10 years trying to send him back to the lab, and continues, saying that it hurts his heart more than any physical injury. With the enemy defeated on the ground, he asks why he did all of that to him. The young man says he still doesn't understand and wants to know what the lab promised in return. With a clenched fist, he reminds the traitor that that place is horrible, and he knows it. Lying on the ground, the former friend says it makes no difference what he says now. He then confirms that he follows the lab and was indeed going to sell him to them. With a sad look, the protagonist realizes they can no longer go back to being friends. He grits his teeth in frustration and cannot accept his former friend's answer. With that, the hero lands another punch to the traitor's face, who doesn't react to the attack. Then the young man shouts and asks what he is talking about and continues to hit the enemy. The hero shouts for the traitor not to decide things on his own and continues to attack him. He yells for his former friend not to run away, saying that everything ended that way. At that, the young man demands to know what the lab offered in exchange for his capture. He continues shouting for the enemy to say something, even if it's a lame excuse. With his face close, he begs the traitor to speak if they were ever truly friends. The former friend then finally answers with a was, and seems to reflect on the past. Hearing the word friend, the hero remembers the times they spent together in the lab. In a memory, we see the young mutants having fun and playing like children. They even fought and seemed to have a very strong and sincere friendship. All the friends would gather and have fun together, despite the suffering of that place. The traitor remembers how much fun they had in the few moments of peace they had. But back in the present, he says he has nothing to say, and the protagonist is shocked. Suddenly, several armed soldiers descend from the ceiling and surround the two in the warehouse. The young man looks up, completely surprised, as he wasn't expecting that ambush. He notices that there are many men and that they are all heavily armed, ready to shoot, with his arm raised. He wonders who these guys are that appeared out of nowhere. The young man becomes tense and realizes the situation has suddenly become much more dangerous. The soldiers then get ready and aim their weapons at the two mutants on the ground. In a few seconds, they are completely surrounded by an army of armed men. One of the soldiers reports over the radio that a heart mutant has been detected at the location. Hearing this, the hero realizes that these men are from the lab and becomes terrified. He remembers the day he escaped and how he was chased by these same soldiers. Back then, he was brutally attacked and had no chance to defend himself. Several men surrounded him and fired relentlessly to capture him and take him back. The memory leaves him completely terrified, and he realizes he needs to get out of there. Without a second thought, the young man picks up his former friend's body and prepares to escape. The hero then rips a metal pipe from the floor to use for a boost in his escape. With the pipe, he launches himself into the air with impressive force to break through the encirclement. Carrying the traitor on his shoulders, he leaps over all the soldiers to escape. Seeing the scene, the soldiers shout that the mutant is escaping and run to pursue him. With his former friend on his shoulders, the hero lands hard on the metal floor of the warehouse. But he barely has time to breathe as the soldiers are already surrounding him from all sides. One of the men reports that the mutant's escape route has been blocked and that they are cornered. Panting, the young man realizes he has nowhere to run and that the situation has gotten very ugly. From above, we see how the young man is completely surrounded by dozens of armed soldiers. Then the team leader introduces himself as Jinwook and tells everyone to maintain their watch. He gives the order to fire if the mutants try to resist capture in any way. The protagonist is terrified because if he's caught, he'll be sent back to that lab. The leader then prepares to give the final order and end the situation once and for all. But suddenly, a feminine hand grabs his radio and interrupts his communication. An elegant woman appears and faces him with a serious and authoritative look. She introduces herself as the leader of the Special Mutant Task Force and takes control. The leader is shocked and doesn't understand how the famous Song Hyein appeared there out of nowhere. All the other soldiers are also surprised and wonder what the leader is doing there. With that, the woman orders everyone to lower their weapons and cease fire immediately. The soldiers obey, and the protagonist stands there, not understanding what is happening. The woman then approaches the young man with a confident stride and a calm look on her face. She says he must be Go, and the young man is surprised that she knows his name. Then she calms him down and reveals that she came to help him because she heard everything from her younger sister. Shocked, the hero realizes she can only be the older sister of his friend Hyaji. The woman then introduces herself as Songhai and says it's a pleasure to meet him. The protagonist is shocked as he realizes she can only be his friend's older sister. She then calms him down and tells him not to worry because she'll take care of everything. Then she turns to the soldiers, and one of them confirms she is there because of the incident. The leader then tells them to block civilian access and call the paramedics. But suddenly, the leader of the other team shouts for everyone to wait a second. He then questions the woman and asks if the special forces ignore basic protocols. The man stares at her coldly as he says that his team arrived and took control first. She then explains that when it comes to a wanted mutant, her team has priority. With that, a man beside her shows the arrest warrant and the file for Lee Chae-1. The leader of the other team lets out a laugh and says she seems to be getting it all wrong. He points to the hero and says that his target isn't the traitor, but the young man in the black t-shirt. The man reveals that he checked the cameras and discovered that the boy is also an unregistered mutant. The leader explains that unregistered mutants are civilians and are therefore under his jurisdiction. He then orders his men to aim their weapons at the young man to take him in immediately. The soldiers then get ready and point their weapons at the two mutants on the ground. In a few seconds, they are completely surrounded by an army of armed men. Scared, the young man finds himself surrounded again and doesn't know what to do to escape. He starts to panic and wonders what he can do in such a dangerous situation. But suddenly, his friend's sister uses her power and the soldiers' weapons glow. The men are confused as the weapons in their hands begin to fall apart on their own. In an instant, all the weapons are completely destroyed by the woman's power. The soldiers are in shock and wonder how the weapons broke so quickly. Then they realize that this is leader Songhai's mutant ability in action. The woman then says that they still don't seem to have understood the situation correctly. Furious, the leader shouts and asks why she used her power against allies. Unfazed, the young woman lifts him into the air with her power and stares at him with a serious look. She suspends him in the air and silences him so he can no longer interfere with her plans. With a cold look, she holds him in the air while he struggles, unable to do anything. She then explains that this incident is a special investigation into the Hermes laboratory. The leader is shocked to hear the lab's name and realizes the seriousness of the situation. The woman then tells him to look around and shows him that he no longer has any power here. She points to the destroyed warehouse and says that is the result of their battle. The leader then realizes that if those two are so powerful, they are high-risk mutants. He understands that they are the test subjects the Hermes laboratory was researching. Scared, the man says that if they get involved, their lives will be in danger. The soldiers then take the injured traitor away, and the hero tries to stop them. The young man asks where they are taking his former friend and tries to get closer. But a man stops him and explains that the boy is a criminal they've been looking for. Shocked, the protagonist sees his friend being put in cuffs and wonders what he did wrong. The man then says that the hero also needs to give a statement about what happened. With a smile, he informs him that the young man will have a private interview with the team leader. The boy is terrified at the idea of an interview with such a scary woman. The scene then changes to an interrogation room where the woman is waiting to talk to him. Sitting at the table, the young man trembles with fear, and his friend's sister looks at him with a smile. She tells him not to be tense, as she only called him in to ask a few questions. With a serious look, she reveals that her team is tracking the Hermes laboratory. The woman says she heard from her sister that he was held there and managed to escape 3 years ago. She then shows a file with the data on all of the young man's friends from the lab. The hero is in shock at the news and can't believe what he just heard. The leader explains that it's very likely the lab let them escape on purpose. She says that after recapturing them, they used their weaknesses to force their submission. The young man wonders if that's why his friend turned on him and if he was forced into it. Sitting in a cell, the former friend remains silent and refuses to cooperate. Suddenly, a man announces that a witness has arrived for the questioning. The protagonist is confused and doesn't understand who else could be involved in this. Then a girl in a wheelchair enters the room and introduces herself as Che, Won's sister. The man accompanying her closes the door so they can talk with more privacy. The leader approaches the young woman and says they need to know what she saw to understand the case. The girl seems very scared and nervous about the whole situation inside the room. With tears in her eyes, she says this is all her fault and that her brother isn't like that. She reveals that her brother changed completely because of her and her condition. Terrified, the girl says that if she talks, she might end up losing her brother forever. But the leader warns her that if she doesn't say anything, her brother will take the blame for everything alone. With her face full of tears, the young woman agrees to tell everything she knows about the case. She says she can't let her brother carry this whole burden alone and decides to speak up. The girl begins to tell them that it all started 3 years ago when her brother came back home. She explains that as soon as he escaped from the lab, he ran to see his family again. But when he arrived, he found the house in ruins and his sister alone in a wheelchair. The young woman reveals that their parents had already passed away and she was alone and sick. In shock, the young man calls out to his sister and can't believe what's happening. Heartbroken, he hugs her and promises that he'll protect her from now on. The girl says that her brother worked day and night to take care of her and pay the bills. But since he had no documents, he always earned little and they could barely get by. And all the money he earned went to her expensive medical treatments. Then one day, the men from the lab broke into the house and captured him again. They easily overpowered him and restrained him to take him back to that place. Desperate, the sister screamed and tried to stop them, but was held back by the soldiers there. Furious, the young man shouted for them to let his sister go and threatened to take them all down. But suddenly a mysterious man appeared and said it had been a while since he'd last seen him. He revealed they wouldn't hold him anymore and would give him money and an identity. in exchange, the young man would have to help them with their dirty work without question. The sister says the lab paid for everything, but in return, her brother couldn't say anything. Crying, she says she didn't know he was committing crimes because of her and blames herself. In the interrogation room, the protagonist listens to the whole story and remains silent. He understands that his friend did all of that to get medicine for his sick sister. With the testimony concluded, the girl is taken away and the man helps her with the chair. The leader then says that despite the noble motive, the fact that he tried to turn him in doesn't change. She warns that if his plan had worked, the hero would be back at the lab. With a serious look, the young man agrees, and the woman says his friend will be held accountable for his actions. She then offers him the chance to talk to his friend one last time before everything. The protagonist remains silent, seeming to think about whether or not to accept this offer. With a downcast look, the hero accepts and asks to make the call to his former friend. At that, the young man picks up the phone and waits in silence for the other to answer the call. On the other end of the line, the former friend says he knows he's listening because he picked up. The protagonist then confirms this, says he heard the whole story about what happened. He explains that he heard about his sister and the reason why he tried to sell him out. With a pained look, the young man asks why his former friend didn't say anything sooner. On the other end, the ex-companion just sighs, not knowing what to say to him. The silence continues, and the hero waits for some kind of answer from the other side. The protagonist asks him to say something and questions why he did it. Full of anger, the young man yells into the phone and calls his former friend a backstabber. He slams the phone hard on the table and demands that the other give some kind of excuse. The young man screams that his friend tried to sell him out and send him back to that lab. The hero accuses him of being scum for doing something so horrible to a friend. With that, he tells his friend to reflect and accept his consequences with his head held high. On the other end of the line, the ex-companion just listens to everything with a very serious look. He then finally agrees and says that maybe this is the right thing to do. On the other end of the line, the former companion hangs up the phone without saying anything else. But the hero says the authorities will take care of his sister and that she didn't do anything wrong. He keeps talking and says his friend is scum, but his sister did nothing. He tells his ex-friend to just serve his time and get out of there soon. With that, he asks his friend to make him another hamburger because it was delicious. The former friend hangs up the phone with a look of pure gratitude for his words. In a memory, we see the little skeleton playfully punching his friend. His friend puffs out his cheeks and looks mad about his friend's joke. Back in the present, he thanks his friend and seems to have found a little peace. The protagonist hangs up the phone, and the conversation finally comes to an end. The team leader asks if that was enough for him and looks at him with a serious expression. The young man explains that he thought his other friends had also escaped from the lab. The woman asks if that was enough and comments that he's more generous than she imagined. But the hero explains that he thought his other friends had also escaped from the lab. He realizes he was mistaken and that everyone is still trapped in that horrible place. With a determined look, he says he wants to save his friends and asks for her help. The woman smiles and seems interested in the young mutant's proposal. She then picks up her cell phone from the table, as if she were already expecting this. The woman says she would accept the help, but asks if he's sure about what he's doing. The hero states that he's no longer a weak skeleton and shows off his strong, muscular arm. With fire in his eyes, he vows to save his friends and destroy the lab once and for all. The scene changes to an apartment building at night, and it seems they've gone home. The team leader runs inside, shouting her sister's name while the hero follows her. With that, the woman hugs her sister tightly, saying she missed her. The girl yells for her sister to stop because she's squeezing too tight and can't breathe. The boy watches the scene and realizes that his friend's sister is a completely different person at home. He thought she was the scary type, but it seems he was very mistaken. However, he realizes she's the sweetest person in the world with her little sister. The girl then asks the protagonist if he's okay, As she heard about the commotion, the young man gets a little embarrassed by the question and doesn't quite know what to answer. He then says everything is fine and that her sister took care of the whole situation. His friend is relieved to hear that and seems calmer with his answer. The boy turns bright red when the young woman asks if he wants to eat the dish she prepared. His friend remembers she sent her sister a message about the food and calls her to come eat. All excited, the girl brings a huge pot with the food she prepared for them. Her older sister stares at the food with a grim look on her face when she sees the strange ingredients. She then asks who on earth taught her sister to cook like that. The girl shows a recipe on her phone and says someone named GBT taught her. The leader wonders if that crazy artificial intelligence dared to make fun of a human. She explains that the food isn't good and that if they eat it, they'll get sick. The young woman looks sad and confesses she changed the original recipe from the app a little. She explains she wanted her sister to feel more energetic, so she added the fruit. The leader is shocked and speechless upon hearing her younger sister's justification, but so as not to hurt her feelings, she eats the food and says it's delicious. The younger sister is surprised and says she doesn't have to force herself to eat. With a forced smile, the woman says the food is delicious and gives a thumbs up. Her sister is happy and asks if it's true, because the combination of ingredients is good. The woman keeps eating and says it's a mix of everything that's tasty. The young woman is beaming with happiness to see that her older sister liked the food. The protagonist also eats and says it's very good to please his friend. He keeps eating and says he could eat this every day. It's that good. The leader stares at him and wonders if his taste buds haven't regenerated. The two then clear their plates and give thanks for the delicious meal. The woman then says they need to clear something up before they continue. She points to the young man and says they need to sort out his living situation. The leader explains that having a healthy man living with two women is a problem. Her younger sister gets worried and asks where her friend is going to stay now. The woman says she thought about taking him to the headquarters, but it's too risky. She then takes out her cell phone to try and resolve the situation another way. She calls someone and requests an urgent official residence for the young mutant. After the call, she looks disappointed and says there are no vacancies at the moment, but she explains that a room will be available soon and that it's a relief. With a smile, the hero thanks her for the help and seems very happy with the news. His friend also celebrates and says she's very happy for him and his puppy, but the woman says she's not done yet and grabs a pen to write something. The boy is confused and doesn't understand what else she could be planning. She slams her hand on the table and puts down a paper with a list of rules for him. She explains that in return, he can only stay in the living room and cannot enter her sister's room. The leader hands him the list with 10 rules and tells him to read and sign the document. She threatens him and says that if he breaks any rules, the consequences will be terrible. She then stares at him with a serious look and says he'll see something worse than he can imagine. The young man is terrified by the threat and promises to follow all the rules to the letter. The hero and his friend look at the list of rules and are shocked by how many there are. The leader then says that's enough talk about the living situation and calls the boy to go out. The young man is terrified and asks where they are going with a fearful look. The woman explains that she needs to check the extent of his mutation, and that's why they're going out. They go to a remote location, and she says it's perfect there because no one is around. She reminds him that he said he wanted to help destroy the lab, and that to do so, she needs to know his abilities. The boy explains that if he gets hurt, he can regenerate his body by consuming blood. He continues, saying that if he absorbs enough blood, he can regenerate several times. The woman stares at him and says she doesn't think regeneration is his only power. She remembers the fight scene and says there were traces of superhuman strength at the location. The young man says he's always had that, and that maybe his physical attributes are just better than others. She stares at him and says his attributes seemed to be a little more than just better. He explains that he never fully regenerated at the lab and only realized it now. The woman understands that the blood acts as both medicine and a source of power for him. With that, she steps back and prepares to test the young mutant's strength. She tosses a dynamometer to him and asks him to squeeze it with all his strength. The boy catches the object and prepares for the test with a slightly tense look. He remembers seeing one of those at the lab and seems a little uncomfortable. He holds the device and wonders if this is the correct way to use it. With determination, he concentrates and puts all his strength into his hand for the test. He concentrates the blood in his hand and squeezes the dynamometer with impressive force. With a grunt of effort, he squeezes the device so hard that he shatters it into pieces. The young man is shocked by what he just did and can't believe his own strength. The woman is surprised and says that device could measure up to 500 kilograms. She realizes the boy's grip strength is greater than a gorilla's. The boy apologizes for breaking the device and says he didn't know he was that strong. The woman says he's stronger than she thought and seems impressed. She then uses her power and levitates some rocks from the ground to test something else. The young man is confused and doesn't understand what she's planning to do with those rocks. Suddenly, the rocks fly in his direction at high speed to test his reflexes. The young man dodges the rocks with impressive agility, contorting himself in the air, but one of the rocks ends up hitting him square in the head, and he cries out in pain. The woman is impressed because she controlled the rocks randomly, and he dodged almost all of them. She then says that with this level of physical skill, he is a high-rank mutant. The boy comments that the rocks moved as if they were alive and asks if her mutation is a superpower. The team leader just stares at him in silence without giving any answer about her ability. She then tells him not to be silly, as mutations are within the realm of science. The woman explains that her mutation is a national secret, and that's why she can't tell him. With that, she warns him that he also needs to keep his abilities a secret and not draw attention. The woman adds that he probably knows this better than she does from his experience. The protagonist reflects on her words and realizes the woman is right. He remembers all the times he used his power recklessly and decides to be more careful. But suddenly, her sister shows up at the location and finds them talking there. The girl arrives excitedly with a bag and a can of soda, saying she bought drinks. The young man gets all excited by the surprise, while the older sister watches the scene. The leader thinks to herself that deep down, he's still just a kid, despite everything. His friend asks where her sister is going, and she says she needs to take a work call. The boy starts drinking the soda while his friend watches him with a smile on her face. He exclaims that the soda is delicious and seems to have never tasted anything so good. The young man describes the sensation, saying it's sweet, and it feels like his brain is lighting up. He says it's like a switch flipped in his head, and his friend is happy that he liked it. But suddenly he stops and holds the can, as he feels he's tasted that flavor before. A memory of his former friend serving him a hamburger comes to his mind. The boy realizes he drank this with the hamburger his ex-friend made for him. His friend notices the change in his expression and asks what's wrong. The young man just says it's nothing and looks away with a sad expression. The girl keeps looking at him, not understanding the reason for his sudden change in mood. He then explains that he just remembered his friend and the other companions for a moment. The two of them sit on a bench, and the boy says they were all very close. His friend says that he really thinks a lot about his friends and that she can see how much he values them. He explains that to him, his friends were like family, and remembering the lab is a nightmare. The boy recalls the horrible moments he went through in that place, suffering from the experiments. But he remembers that the moments with his friends made him forget all the pain he felt. The young man says they were the only ones who kept him going in that dreadful place. He wanted everyone to escape together, but Layman's being the only one who managed to get out. With a somber look, he says his friends are still trapped in the clutches of that lab. Clenching his fists, the protagonist states with determination that he will save them all. He vows that he'll rescue them, even if it means he has to fight and take down the whole place. His friend watches him in silence, seeming moved by his determination. She says she's not a mutant, but if there's anything she can do, he can count on her. With a radiant smile, the girl asks him to just let her know any time. The hero stares at her for a moment, surprised by her offer of help. He then smiles back and thanks for being willing to help him. A few days later, the scene changes to a high school, and it seems he's going to start attending. Two female students see the boy and wonder if he's the new transfer student. Some girls comment on his looks, and one says she's going to ask for his Instagram. The teacher tells the class to be quiet and announces they have a new classmate today. The young man's heart beats fast, and he wonders if he'll be able to fit in here. In front of the class, he still doesn't quite understand how all of this happened so fast. Very nervous, he tries to introduce himself to his new classmates. He introduces himself as Kim Jio and remembers the leader said he would find his friend here.